Jon, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you. Are you the first guest who's been back? I'm trying to think about that.
This is now my third appearance.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jeez, I forgot about the second. It's your third. That's right.
Well, to be fair, the second wasn't terribly memorable in terms of me. We had a pretty interesting conversation.
Pirate
I wasn't
history.
a part of it. Yeah, the pirate history.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. So this is your third appearance. Holy cow.
I'm a regular.
Wow. Jon. I love it.
Me too, actually. It's good fun.
It's fun. Our podcast's fun.
More fun than I ever would have imagined.
Isn't it crazy? It's an experience.
Well, the thing is, my crazy meter is broken.
What do you mean? Dude. Put that, there we go, closer to your mouth. Perfect.
My crazy meter is broken.
What do you mean?
I mean, crazy don't know is crazy.
That is true. That's true. What's normal you might think is crazy, and what's crazy you might think is
Exactly.
normal.
You got it, boss.
You got it, boss.
Man, so where did we leave off last time? I think we were actually having the foggiest idea.
We had a good conversation last time, specifically about taxiing a 747.
It's the best experience in commercial aviation.
It's true, though, because you know what? After I had you on, I had my own flight instructor on, who's now an airline pilot.
Oh, total snooze fest.
Yeah. No. And he was saying, it's interesting, he was actually saying that along the lines of what you said. He said that when you fly an airplane in the air, they're all the same. But a 747 is the most different on the ground. And that's probably
right.
why it stood out.
That's right.
Yeah, that's probably why it stood out to you. Incredible. I like your jacket.
Thanks very much. As you know, I cycled here.
You're insane. So where'd you cycle from? How
I started
far?
today in Tarzana,
Okay.
and I finished, where are we, Manhattan Beach? Stopped in Beverly Hills for what should have been lunch, but I never had any.
On a bicycle.
On a bicycle. It turned out to be about 35 miles. Just about.
Whoa. It seems long.
You know what?
Just
people who are cyclists, proper cyclists, will maybe do that or a similar distance every morning before they go to work, or maybe on the way to work, or half on the way to work and half on the way back. So it's not such a serious distance.
I'm probably thinking like a runner.
In which case, 35 miles would be
A lot.
a lot of miles.
Right.
As a runner, I typically don't run more than 7 at a time. Sometimes as many as 9 or 10, but I normally try and keep it below the 10-mile range. That way I can, be lazy and get a good workout out of 6 miles instead of having to run 20 to feel like I accomplished anything.
35 miles. How do you deal? You were telling me before we started. How is I'm sure it's tough for someone like yourself who works out all the time to not be able to do it all of a sudden. Like, not that you can't, you could totally, but like if you take running away from a marathoner, it's difficult. Like
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there's some psychological aspects you feel like, not just like something's been taken. There's the very basic, I feel like going for a run. So what do I do instead? Well, I can't.
Right.
And you have that instantaneous, I want to be running and I'm not. And then you have this sort of meta disappointment that something's been taken from you, almost like theft, robbery.
Right.
So you feel, in fact, in my case, I feel like I've been, like violently mugged or something like that.
Give me my running back.
Give me my damn running back.
Give me my workout back.
Exactly. And I'd like to do that on the double, please. But it's apparently not on order at the moment. So I just have to one step at a time this thing.
I love it. Good for you.
Yeah.
Good fitness guy. If anyone in LA is looking for a fitness instructor, reach out.
That's it. I'm your guy.
I'm just saying. I'm
free until roughly 2024.
I'm just putting it out there. Just reach out, and Jon will get you in shape. Lose all that fat. Lose all that fat.
I will teach you how to burn that fat and grow that beard. Both things require stunningly little effort.
Lose all that fat and run. Run with Jon. That should be a t-shirt.
Run run with Jon. Do you know what I thought about doing on, I think it was Santa Monica Beach. I thought that I would, and this is, when I was having when I thought that I would be allowed to run again soon, I was just slowly ratcheting up the miles. I thought I'd go out there with a poster board, hold it over my head, and it said, "Take me with you. Walk, run, any pace, any place. Let's go." And just see who wanted to run with me.
Do you think people would sign up?
I would have literally rolled the poster board up and started running with them. It wasn't going to be a sign-up thing. It was just going to be a I'm here, you're here, you want to run together thing. Because you and I have run together.
Yeah.
And it's always better than running by yourself.
100%.
Even if we run at, like, normally what would be a different pace from one another, we find one that's kind of in the middle or mutually amenable. There's no bad pace for running, is it?
100%. I mean, running, I always thought, well, because I enjoy listening to music, I always said, I like running alone. I don't want to run with people. But you could listen to music when you're running with someone. There's something to running alongside
it's a bit
someone.
Rude.
I know it's a bit rude.
But it's fine.
But there's something to running alongside someone that it's different. It's this energy. It's weird.
Yeah. I mean, just as much as sitting next to someone, even if you're not talking to them, is different than sitting by yourself.
100%.
And all the more so when you're doing something together, even if you're doing it separately.
Human beings, we need connection. You know what we need to invent? We need to invent Tinder for runners or for working out buddies.
Supposedly that kind of thing exists, but there's not a lot of traction on it. Oh, gosh, I'm trying to think of examples off the top of my head. We could probably bust out our various electronical devices and see if we...
Why on airplanes are cell phones electronic devices and the bathrooms are lavatories?
Oh, man.
What is it?
Scratch my head, and it'd be a lot of air silence if I tried to come up with an idea there.
On airplanes, everything has different words. Lavatories.
Lavatory?
Lav.
Okay.
What
else have we got? I mean, are the seats are still seats, right?
It's not a kitchen, it's a galley.
It is a galley. You know what? Maybe these things come from a nautical nature. I would say nautical nature, but I mean, everyone knows. Actually, maybe everyone doesn't know.
Everyone doesn't know.
You know what? Let me back this up a little bit. Because you could be a pilot, and that did not imply an airplane for most of history. That implied some kind of a sea vessel, did it not?
Right, you could pilot something.
You would, and even still, you'd be a pilot, but it could be of a boat. And in fact, it normally is of a boat. We just think as aviators that the world revolves around us.
Right.
If it revolves at all, it's because we're spinning it. Just ask the captain, or don't. He'll tell you anyway.
If it revolves at all, it's because we're spinning it. Yes.
Right?
That's funny.
So we think, it's obvious that when you say you're a pilot, that you're a pilot of an airplane. That's implicit with the definition. Maybe it is these days, but it hasn't always been, and even so, pervasively it isn't. I've been somewhere and someone asked me what I do for a living, and I eventually had to tell them I was a pilot because I couldn't get around it anymore. And they said, "Oh, of what?"
Really?
And I said, "Oh, and I meant, I thought he meant of a specific aircraft, so I mentioned it. And he said, "What's that?" He didn't know what the plane was. And he was a nautical person by trade, so a pilot to him just meant someone driving a boat.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was a whole new world for me.
That's rare, because when I tell someone I'm a pilot, I expect them to know exactly how cool I am.
You expect their jaw to drop and their eyes to widen and maybe to blush a little.
Oh, to blush.
Yeah. Wow. No. But in the presence of greatness, I've been speaking to you by using your first name. I can't.
No, it's you know what though? At least we could joke about it. At least we could take a good joke.
Oh, some people are out there wearing their double-breasted jacket to bed, I'm pretty sure.
I know, yeah. Some pilots.
Wearing their hats into the lavatory.
Yeah, so that's, I don't know where that came from. It might be just aeronautical terms.
The galley for sure is a nautical term.
Yeah.
And like a kitchen galley, a galley would be on a ship. There's no doubt about that.
There's galley. What else is there? There's lavatory. There is...
I can also tell you that there must be some physical differences between the galley and a kitchen. I think a kitchen implies cooking equipment to us, and I'm not really sure where the nomenclature originates. But a galley doesn't necessarily have food in it.
Interesting. I don't know. That's why I'm asking. It's
It'd
a
be
really
a
interesting.
hallway of some kind.
Galley.
Yeah, we'll have to look into it because we're starting to sound like speculative idiots, and the very typical thing a pilot will do with enough time in the left seat is he'll tell you how it is, whether he has any idea or not.
So let's not let ourselves get there.
Might be too late.
Oh, that is funny.
Yeah, I'll walk myself back from it.
We'll walk backwards. So how's life been? How's life?
It's had their ups and downs, I'm sure.
Just like, it's funny when you think about it in life, everything in life is up and down. It's really interesting. What is one thing in life that is just flat forever? I can't think of something.
The only thing permanent is change.
It's not crazy. Like everything's up and down. Everything.
You ever seen those? Maybe when we were kids, there were these videos in your science class, and they were about erosion. Of course, erosion happens slowly, usually, except for great big leaps and bounds when there's a catastrophic event. But generally, you have to see the video in fast forward over a number of days, months, years. And you'd see something form or something which was formed and then be worn away. A mountaintop, a glacier, something of this nature. Erosion happens sort of slowly over time, but it never stops. It always just continues. It just carry on eroding. And I think, in some senses, I feel like when you're having a hard time in life, you can feel like everything is eroding on you. And you have to build it back, and there's never a moment's peace because no matter how strong you build your fortress or whatever metaphoric fortress you're building, something is eroding it from the time you put it up. Yeah, so there's hardly a moment's peace, and that's just sort of what life is like sometimes, or at least you can choose to see life like that sometimes.
Whoa, I was talking with someone recently who said something and reminded me of you because I think you said it too. A few times ago that we saw each other, and it was something to the effect of, it was about asking for help, reaching out, something like that. And this guy was telling me a story about his grandmother who wanted him to visit, and then he said, I can't this weekend, and then like legit she passed away that weekend.
Oh man.
And ever since then he's like, if someone asks for help, I'm doing it, because you don't know if maybe they don't have the weekend. And it really hit me. And then he said that when people ask for help, he said people don't ask for help because they enjoy it. And that really hit me, because how often do people ask for help and I sit there, like how often, it's so easy to push people off and go, but when you really think about it, no one asks for help because they enjoy asking for help.
Well, they certainly don't enjoy needing it.
Or even asking for it.
Most of the time, yeah. I'm sure there's some sort of equivalent or, whatever the nomenclature equivalent of hypochondriac is for someone who asks for help a lot.
That's true. There's hypochondriac,
yeah, sort of a compulsion of their own, bordering on a disorder or something debilitating. But by and large, for the vast majority of people don't want to ask for help around here.
Right.
That's not really the American way sometimes, is it?
It's not easy. I think especially in this society, when I think it goes hand in hand. The more perfect you have to look to others, the more difficult it is to ask for help. Now, I don't know. I don't live 200 years ago. I don't know if it were any different.
I dare venture, but there's yeah, I'm going to do it. I'll bring it up.
Okay.
The topic of femininity and masculinity.
Let's go there.
We're going there. Let's go there right now.
Let's go there like deep.
If you're a guy growing up in the States, say, pick an age, an arbitrary age, but you're not yet an adult.
13.
Okay, great. So you're 13 years old, and you fall down, you trip or something stupid like that. You can get up. Do you want someone to help you up? Or do you immediately think to yourself, I better stand up? I was the kind of kid personally, if I tripped, I hoped no one saw that.
Right.
And I'm going to stand up quickly, dust myself off, and pretend like it never happened, look around, be like, nothing to see here, folks. This would be my sort of mode of self-protection.
Right.
So what am I protecting? when I do that. If someone was reaching up to give me a hand, I got it.
Mm.
Why am I doing that? Why am I doing that as a 13-year-old boy or a 10-year-old boy or even like an adult? Say, why am I doing that? Why don't I want someone to help me?
That's so interesting because you haven't yet experienced the Instagrams of the world and the whole. Why do you do that? Where are you going with this? That it's because I like masculinity and femininity.
I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot in the pot there, but let me take that out as one ingredient and say I don't want someone to see me weak.
Right. Where does that come from, though? Because you're 13.
Where does that come from? Yeah, I'm 13, but I'm older than 13. My genome is 100,000 years old and then some.
Right.
So I have some instincts, for lack of a better or more accurate description in this context. I don't want someone to see me weak.
And that's a human thing.
I think that might be a human thing, but I can't vouch for the female of the species. But I can tell you with great certainty among my cohort,
for the female of the species.
We find it as men who find ourselves, we really say that we're masculine. We would find it difficult, extra difficult, asking for help, but we're literally admitting that we need it. And that doesn't fit the paradigm.
It goes against everything that we think we need to be.
Sure, and certainly you look to the say other primates around, the ones we don't describe as human, and they typically or often cases have an alpha in the group. That alpha doesn't need help. The alpha gets everything and doesn't need something from you. In fact, you kind of serve the alpha. So if you're not the alpha, then that's a problem, potentially a problem for you. Now, I've seen some very interesting studies on what it means to be an alpha, and your stress levels are pretty high because you got to keep your spot, and that's not easy.
Right.
In fact, in various groups of antelope, particularly in the springbuck, one male basically breeds with all the females and doesn't eat at all because he's busy protecting his females. So now he's basically going to starve himself out of the gene pool if he's not careful, because this is his priority.
Dude.
Exactly. So he's busy being tough.
So he's mating with all the women.
He's mating and looking tough, but he forgot to eat.
Wow.
Right. So, and I'm not saying that we're all springbuck or antelope, but we do have lots in common with a lot of other creatures out there.
100%.
And one of those things we have in common is preservation of our image. And we don't want to be threatened. I don't know. It's a real shame that we don't have a female of the species here
with us to confirm this.
To confirm.
Man, I don't know. I forget her name. What was her name? Do you remember her name?
No, I have
no idea. Who we talked to?
I don't know any.
Man, she'd be a great addition. I'm sure she'd have what to say about this.
Man.
Therapist.
Oh yeah, we do. In fact, maybe we should knock on the door and ask her to join us.
Yeah, she's nice. She's good people. But no, I hear you. That is so interesting. You're right, because if I'm 10 and I fall down, I don't want people to see it. And it must be two options. Either my parents or the house I grew up in raised me to be that way. But even if that's not the case, you're right. My genes are older than me. And there's something about me being seen as weak or as needing help or as whatever, that as a human I struggle with the idea that others see that, and that's fascinating where that comes from.
I believe that we witness, even if it's not inherent to our nature. You'd be hard pressed to convince me it's not, but say that it weren't, then certainly we witness that people prey on the weak in the jungle of human activity.
Man,
we see it all the time, right? You don't want to be seen as weak,
right? For
wherever that comes from. I'm sure that's a human thing more than a masculine or feminine thing, in the way that I understand masculinity and femininity. But while we're speculating on that, I heard an article recently that in one of the southern states, someone was going to look into, I believe, gender affirmation therapy as child abuse.
Wait, say that again. Gender affirmation therapy. So that's where parents send their child to someone to figure out, am I a male or am I a female?
The opposite, actually. The child decides that they're not the physically assigned gender they were assigned at birth.
So the parents go to therapy?
So the kid goes to a therapist who helps that kid affirm that they are indeed not
Whoa.
that male that they were assigned at birth or female they were assigned at birth.
That happens.
Yes, apparently so. Well, okay, so you're, an 8-year-old apparently, and have the ability to say, I feel much more like someone else than I feel like myself, and that's gained a lot of validity. Apparently, you can say that, and that has to be respected as truth. So
Keep
in that,
going.
yeah.
Okay.
So this 8-year-old says, you know what? For XYZ reason, I am not a male or I am not a female like I've been assigned by society or culture. I'm not. I'm simply not. So I'm going to reassign myself physically, and that's going to happen. And the parents in this scenario say, okay, well, I thought we had a son. I guess we have a daughter. It's funny that it could be so binary like that, but never mind. That's another story. So we don't have a son. We have a daughter.
Chris becomes Christina.
Piece of cake. Just gotta, go get some help being sure of it. That's all. So a senator has decided that's really not a good idea. In fact, we have a bass backwards if that's how we're doing it.
Right.
In the words of my favorite episode in Letterkenny, what kind of backwards pageantry is this? And so anyway, the senator took up that point of view and decided that's not that. Not only is that poppycock, but it's abuse.
Yeah,
it's abuse. So I wanted to get someone else's thoughts on that, because surely I don't understand everyone's struggle. But to say, for someone else to say, whether it's you or me, you could say, hey, John, I feel more like you than myself. I wouldn't have any idea what you're talking about. I find it wild that people can say, I feel more like a person I've never been than I feel like myself. Personally, I think it's a reflection of if it were, say, someone with a similar mind, it would have to be a reflection of the culture's influence on me, which says a lot about how effective culture's influence can be. But there might be, people who are physiologically not what they appear, and I don't know a thing about it, but I can't imagine. And I wonder if you have maybe met some people who have described that feeling to you.
I have, and I also have some opinions about it. And so let me do this. Let me give you two sides of the cake from my perspective.
Okay.
When it comes to just, let's talk about an individual who, for whatever reason, believes that they are a dude who believes he's a woman.
Okay. So
the first slice of the pie, I'll start with probably how you see it, and how, what it sounds like you would say, hey, this is how we should go about things.
Well, for the record, I don't think anyone should tell anyone else how to go about doing anything, because I don't want anyone telling me how to go about doing stuff.
Perfect.
So
perfect.
There's that. Although I do think it's strange when people do things in their ways that are that much different than what I can understand. So with that in mind.
Yes. So the one side of it is, if someone's brain or mind is telling them something that they're clearly physically not, it would kind of make sense to focus the therapy and treatment and the fixing on the thing that's off, and that is the brain or the thoughts and the mind in the head, right? Because your body's not off. Your brain's off. Now that's another $1 million question.
That is the $1 million question, because if it were that simple.
What? But
sure. Okay, go on, please. Yeah, please.
I'll give you the
please.
two stats. So you're right. So the first question is, what's off, my head or my body? Right?
Okay.
Now, out of head and body, which one changes 20 times a day and which one stays still? My body stays still, and my brain and thoughts change. In fact, we think an average of how many thoughts a day? I forget.
I'm not going to have any idea.
Lots of thoughts a day, right?
Yeah.
So if
Divide it by 2 for me.
There you go.
But still, it's still a lot.
Lots of thoughts. So if we have all these thoughts, right? And one of those thoughts is that my body looks different than what it should. Well, I have many thoughts that change over time and change throughout a given day, but my body stays still and is fixed and it's constant. So maybe, I'm just talking common sense right now, maybe we should focus on why am I having these thoughts? Why am I having these thoughts in my head? If I want to kill myself, why am I having these thoughts? Should I focus on destroying the concept of death? No. Why am I having these thoughts? Right?
I have often wondered how people arrive at suicide as a conclusion, because they'd have to have it as an option first.
Well, we'll get there in a second, but what I want to make sure that is, the first one is, let's focus on the thoughts. But here's the other slice of the pie.
Okay.
The other slice of the pie, and you said, and it's interesting, I too, for a long time was thinking, well, there's no other time in life where we honor an individual who wants to be something different, right? Until you start thinking about it. And in fact, I'll give you an example. You just said you don't understand how someone could want to be something that they never were. What
on the basis that they believe they're that other thing more than they are themselves.
Sure. What is weight loss?
Key element.
Weight loss. A 350-pound person internally feels and sees themselves visually as a skinny person. I need to be skinny. And in fact, they're not changing their thoughts to think they're not fat. They're changing their body to make it smaller, and so their body matches their thoughts. So if you think of weight loss, we don't tell fat people, stop thinking you're fat and start thinking positive, come to terms with who you are and what you look like. We tell fat people, lose weight to match your body with what you think you want to look like. So when I start thinking about different things in life, I started realizing there's some areas where we do match the body to the thoughts. There's other areas where we try and match the thoughts to the thing. So
yeah, sure. Okay,
I'm just presenting some areas here in life where.
Let's dig through that one.
Yeah. So in
theory, anyone could be skinny or fat, right?
In what again?
In theory, hypothetically, anyone could be skinny or fat.
Right.
And in fact, you even have to be skinny first. You have to get fat.
You have to get fat, right?
You can't start that way. You have to fatten up.
Skinny first.
That's it. You have to be skinny first. And the real question is, does that change who you are? So if that's the question, then maybe we don't need to think that hard about people changing their gender assignment, because maybe it doesn't really affect.
What do you mean, does that change who I am?
So if we accept the analogy that changing your body to fit your mind is all we're doing with gender reassignment, then we can go with I want to be skinnier or fatter or whatever, anything you like.
Well, but we have to be careful with what we mean here. I personally don't believe that, and I'm very careful here in not saying that here's a fact. I'm just saying I don't believe that by doing anything, altering my body in any physical way, that changes my gender whatsoever at all. They're unrelated. But we're specifically talking about an individual who has these thoughts about their body and whether or not they should try and conform their thoughts to the body they were given or change the body to match the thoughts they have on the daily. That's the question.
Well, I'll tell you what. I am a short guy.
Okay.
Compared to you anyway.
Okay.
You're like a foot taller than I am.
Am I?
No, you're not. That's an exaggeration.
Yeah.
But that doesn't that is an element of my body. It is not the essence of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So do we say that a person's gender is the essence of who they are?
A person's gender isn't the essence of who they are?
Or is it?
But it is part.
Because some changes are cosmetic. You can be skinny or fat, go back and forth.
Right.
In some ways, these are cosmetic, but they're health issues. Also, any human can do it. There are some things that divide men and women. If there weren't, then you wouldn't be able to reassign yourself to one. This is a full-on jump in the fence, or as much as technologically possible.
So you're saying that, yes, there's times where we match the body to the mind, but it's only with things that are changeable, where gender is not.
It sounds like that is the question of the hour. Okay, so let me ask you again. Is it possible for you, if there's a woman sitting over here, could you tell her with a straight face that you're sure that you're more of a woman than a man?
I personally can't, but I also don't wake up or live my life feeling those feelings.
Okay, so unfortunately, you and I will have to speculate.
Right? No. Wait. Let me ask you this.
I also don't.
Do you not believe that people in the world legit walk around feeling like they are trapped in the wrong body? I'm talking about thoughts, straight up thoughts.
Let's walk ourselves right out. Let's take the 30,000 foot view of that.
Okay.
How can you even? Let me reject the premise entirely.
Okay.
And say, how can you say that you're in the wrong body? How on earth? Like, what body are you supposed to be in?
No, not wrong body. Let me rephrase that. People say that they feel. Obviously, it's such
that's what I'm rejecting, not your phrasing of it, but the fact that a person can conceive of the idea that they don't belong in the body they are.
But that's just a way to make a point exciting. What they're really saying is, I feel like I am naturally connected and attached to my very feminine side, and therefore waking up as a male in terms of my body.
Okay.
Not my mind, that sort of feels like a disconnect for me between how I feel and how I think. You know how people say, if you speak two languages, people ask
they'd have to know
what do you mean?
What is supposed to be. There'd have to be a definition of masculinity and femininity. So these are cultural implications, not physical ones. So you'd have to buy off so hard on culture that you'd be willing to change your body to suit the culture.
You know how people, if you speak two languages, they say, hey, what language do you think in?
Uh-huh.
Right. So are we all part masculine, part feminine?
Let's go with we all have, I think one human and another human have a lot in common.
Do you think all humans have an aspect of both? Some more, some less of either or each?
Well, certainly we all have arms and legs, right?
Well, no, but by masculine and feminine, I mean traits.
Yeah, absolutely. So things that are classically masculine,
yes.
Things that are classically feminine.
We all have both.
Without defining that just loosely. Everyone has.
It's like a spectrum.
Sure, a Venn diagram even.
Perfect.
Spectrum, sure.
Perfect. So the way I think of it, I'm no expert. The way I think of it is the two languages I speak is that feminine and masculine, of which we all have. And some people, for instance, you could speak two languages, but think in one, think in both, think in another. So to me, a transgender and forget transgender, I'm talking about a person who has these thoughts and feelings. That would be someone who has the masculine and feminine like we all do. And rather than only think in one, they either think in both or in the other. And they feel like my body is one language, my mind is another, and that disconnect drives them nuts. I'm assuming other people might have that, and this disconnect drives them less nuts, I think, maybe.
Sure. Well, there's an area of the brain, I think it's the anterior cruciate cingulate. I think so.
Totally know what part you're talking about.
Right. It's the part that monitors inconsistency. Well, if I didn't name it, let me not name it because I'm no kind of neuroscientist.
You could probably say any name you want.
Yeah.
And people will be like,
right?
He is so smart.
Well, I know that is a part of the brain. Okay. Well, there is a part of the brain that monitors for inconsistency.
Okay.
It really stresses you out when you find one, internally or externally. Your ACC, I think it's the ACC, fires like crazy when you see a discrepancy, something that shouldn't be, something that isn't, something that's off.
Right.
And if it can drive you mad and drive you to change something. So you reach for whatever tool is in your kit. And so, I guess that's how people arrive at it. Their brain just can't take it anymore, and they arrive in a certain place and take a certain action. I mean, everyone's driven to an action at some stage.
Yeah.
All right. So we have probably explored that as much as we can without, say, people here to share their perspective. We're
right.
just speculating.
Because we both don't share those feelings.
Right. So leaving that kind of where it is, how do we as a society, we all have to participate in this. How do we measure where to put those sentiments with equality and equity?
Perfect. So the first thing we need to establish is in which ways is an individual who we just described, in which ways do them or anything to do with them and their thoughts and feelings, in which ways does all that spill into your life as Jon? That's the first question. And the first thing I'll say, any way that doesn't directly spill, and keyword directly, because we could sit here and we could find linkages if we tried hard enough between anything and our life. Somehow it has to do, but directly, meaning it directly has to do with your day-to-day life. If it doesn't directly have to do with you, I think it's none of our business personally. Just like on the flip side, anything that I don't affect anyone else directly, I wish for them to not be any of their business.
This is well, I'm not sure this counts or doesn't count, but I think athletics, for example, I think it'll count because I was somehow professionally in athletics.
Exactly. Athletics, whether you're the athlete or consuming the sport on your TV, spills into your life directly. I agree 100%.
Okay, so recently there have been, in the NCAA swimming, a woman who became a man and a man who became a woman, or a male to female, female to male, transgender issues, participating in various swim meets and just crushing the competition.
You could stop right there. I'm completely against it.
Okay.
Shouldn't happen. Horrible. Whoever thought of that, absolutely the craziest idea I've ever heard. And anyone who supports that should really think long and hard as to whether or not by me chopping my thing off, putting on a mini dress, growing some breasts, and calling myself a she, if that's fair for me to absolutely obliterate and knock out real women. By real women, I mean a biological woman who naturally has a smaller frame, smaller body, is less strong. I'm 100% with you. Crazy.
So at least all of these things will serve to force anyone in the conversation to acknowledge that there are differences between men and women.
Oh my gosh, of course. No one ever said there's no differences.
A lot of people want us to treat it that way.
Let me tell you who says that there's big differences.
Go on.
Transgenders. If there were no
difference,
there was nothing for me to transition to. There was nothing for me to transition to. There's massive differences, such big differences that I gotta chop my thing off. That's how big the difference is.
Right.
It's a procedure worth of differences. In fact, it's more than one procedure worth of differences. It's painful worth of differences. It's a whole forcing my immediate circle to call me a she and new pronouns worth of differences. There's a lot of differences. And if there were no differences, we wouldn't be transitioning.
So then, in the world of vast differences, particularly legitimizing transgender operations, which we do, which we legitimize, which are legitimate. To each their own. I'm just because I don't understand it doesn't mean it isn't right. So let's just say that we legitimize this as an American culture, or at least a human culture, and at some capacity. So we do acknowledge there are vast differences between male and female. So how do we celebrate those differences, embrace those differences without I don't know. I don't want to say without offending people because I could care less. Everyone gets offended all the time. It's all the rage to get offended these days. But
you can't control if someone gets offended.
Sure, and I'm not terribly worried. Maybe it's brash. I'm not that worried about everyone's feelings all the time about everything. I would never be able to move because people have a spectrum of feelings. So anybody just has to live their lives.
What's the saying? If you don't want to offend someone, you just keep your mouth shut.
Or stay in bed, don't go outside, like all of it, because people can get offended very easily.
100%.
Especially this day and age. So in the world where people are always offended, and in a world where people act on that being offended, that offendedness, and have legitimacy in their offendedness, how do we balance allowing people to do what they do in their private lives and also not stepping on other people's toes?
100%. So like I said, I think first thing is if it spills into your life in direct ways, you 100% have a say in the matter. 100%. 100%. You pay for the channels on TV to watch a sport you love, and you should get to see fair competition. Fair competition. It's a concept that exists since the beginning of time. We all understand that we would never put a 5-year-old and a 20-year-old to fight each other. Why? Because it's not fair. So now we have a dude who wears a dress and an actual biological woman, and he knocks her out, or she knocks her out, whatever you want to call this individual, and we call that fair. That is not fair. So that's the first thing I'll say. That's not fair. So anything that directly affects your life, I'm with you. Now, in areas that it doesn't affect your life, I personally am of the belief that if someone wants you to call her a she or a he, here's the thing. I don't really have the time to start arguing with that personally. You want me to call you a she, I'll call you a she. You want me to call you a he, I'll call you a he. Whatever you want. You want me to say that by chopping the thing off and putting on women's clothing, you're now a different gender? That I won't do, because I don't lie to people, and I don't lie to myself. So depends how far you want to take in the conversation. But in terms of me referring to you as a woman and saying she and telling you you're so pretty and you look magnificent and oh my gosh, I'll do whatever you want me to do, no problem. But I would not say that
There are some babes out there who used to be dudes.
I'm with you. I'm with you 100%.
I mean, haven't you ever been to Thailand?
dude, there's some good, I think there was a Victoria's Secret one, model.
Probably more than one.
Dude, I'm not saying they can't, you could be beyond good. There's many of them are better looking than biological women.
Haven't you ever been to Vietnam? Sorry, I'm just kidding.
No, many of them are better looking than, we're not sitting, this is not a conversation on looks. No one is sitting here knocking looks. We're strictly talking facts here. You want me to call you a she? No problem. You want me to say that now you're a different gender? I don't believe it's something that could be changed. Just like I don't believe that, just like I don't believe that I could have this in front of me and nothing else, and at the same time I have a bottle of vodka and a bottle of wine here. The facts are facts, right? But if you want me to call this a plate, I could do that. If you want me to call this something else, I'll do that. No, it doesn't really affect me. I don't see it as affecting me. If other people see it as it affects their life directly, I respect that. That's for them to decide. But for me personally, let's call things as they are.
So how should we divide the NCAA swimming divisions? Should we no longer do male and female? Should we divide them up to, how should we divide them to see a fair competition, people really competing? I mean, it doesn't do any good to have Michael Phelps in the college division, right? We take him out whether he's a man or not, because he's killing everyone. So what division does he go? He goes to the Olympics, and then he still kills people. So
and that's another problem, right? Where do you draw the line on the other side?
Well, okay, so in rugby you'd have a weight grade. In boxing you have a weight grade.
Okay.
So I ask you then, will a 60-kilogram female fight a 60-kilogram male? Will that actually be a fight to watch? Will that be a fair fight? I don't know.
Right. So that's an interesting question. So first of all, I don't think same gender. So again, you're talking to someone who believes there's two different genders and they both shouldn't compete with each other ever, period. That's my belief. Now, does that mean there's no women who could kick men's ass? Heck no. Does that mean that there's no men? We're talking generalities here. There's women who are so badass, I don't want to cross their. Let me tell you something. There's women who will kick my butt and will make a schmata out of me. I'm not sitting here saying everyone's everything, but generally speaking, I don't think females should compete with males. But also to what you were saying, Michael Phelps, when someone reaches a level that just completely destroys everyone, it's interesting because on the one hand you go, wait a minute, okay, so he's the winner, he's the best. Right? That's what this is about. He deserves it. On the other hand, you go, well, no one really has a fair chance here. And if we want to stick with what we said before, fair competition, there's many other ways where it could not be fair beyond transgenderism. Transgenderism is just a small little blip in sports that might make things unfair. Take drug use, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We frown upon hormone therapy in every sport. I mean, Lance Armstrong's basically been dismissed from the thing that he crushed, by the way, while everyone else was doing it too, but never mind.
Right. But there's so many other things that will make it not fair.
Exactly.
And that's an interesting thing. Where do you draw the line?
So where do we draw the line?
Big question. Well, I won't sit here and pretend I know.
Okay, so let's say that we will draw a line somewhere. My my lead into this is, how do we reconcile that in day-to-day in the workforce? Everyone's got to get a job, right? And the big thing that we are all focused on is equity,
right,
and equality.
Right.
These words, which tend to confuse a lot of people.
Equality is easy. People make it complicated.
Go on. Simplify it.
Equality is very easy. Equality is simply, and this might shock you.
Go on.
Equality. That's it. That's all equality is. Here's an easy way to talk about equality.
How does that apply? I mean,
I'll tell you in a second. I'll explain what I mean by that.
Okay.
Has anyone ever told you that best way to make a decision is to make one? You heard that before?
I have.
Right? Because it says if people struggle with decisions, like just make it. So here's the thing about equality. Equality is nothing more and nothing less than equality. But here's where people get it confused and complicate things. People start changing the definitions of equality. For instance, we're talking about transgenders. Take anything, for example, right? Let's take men and women, for instance.
Okay.
If it's fair game for me to not hire you as a dude, here's what equality is. I should have the same fair game to not hire her as a chick.
Okay, so we have definitely eliminated equality from the workforce.
That's equality.
In favor of equity.
That's equality.
Okay, so equality doesn't exist.
Equality doesn't exist in the world barely anymore at all.
Did it ever?
I don't know.
Okay, so we can talk about equality as an ideal, but not something that we even practically attempt to achieve, because it doesn't seem to be a very high priority for us.
It's absolutely not. We live in a world. We live in a world that.
Is it a goal, or is it it's obviously not a method, because we're not doing it. So is it a goal? Is equality the goal?
Equality is.
I feel like it shouldn't be the goal. I feel like people have differences and we should celebrate them, or we can just be all homogenized if you like.
It depends what you mean. I think equality should be a goal, but I think most people who push for equality in this day and age are pushing for something that is the exact opposite of equality. Just like in the same breath, I'll say that the people who push for tolerance are not tolerant. It's the same exact idea.
Great. So let's see that in action. Where do we see a great example of supposed equality or a chasing of equality, where in fact we're seeing oppression? Where are we seeing that? Or the opposite of equality, whatever that might be.
This is interesting. I'm no expert in this. I won't sit here and claim I've done research and stuff, but I'll share with you things that I hear on the street in the world that I live in.
Let's start there.
I don't know if it's true or not.
Anecdotes.
Right. I don't know if it's true or not. I'll even ask you this because it's such an easy one. If you asked 10 black people whether or not they think they have the same opportunity of getting hired as white people, what do you think they'll tell you?
In my industry?
Anywhere. You asked 100 people. Is it 50-50? Is it 20-70? Take a guess.
Okay, so I think that the popular narrative is that black people do not have equal opportunity.
There you go. So do they? Are they lying? Are they not? I don't know. But if we go with the fact that they're speaking the truth, then maybe there's no equality, which I don't think there is.
Okay.
If they're not speaking the truth, let's look at other areas where people claim to not have equality, which is pretty much any area of your life. Transgenders. I'm assuming 100 out of 100 of them would probably say, I feel like I don't have equality. I think. Or 90% of them.
Okay, does anyone feel like they have equality then? Because you would say that I've heard so many people tell me that in aviation that women don't get paid as much as men, and it makes me crazy.
That's
because we have a pay scale based on longevity. No matter what position you're in, you cannot you will be forcing statistics to lie for your point of view.
Right, but the whole pay women get paid less thing, that doesn't refer to pay scales as much as it refers to overall. So, for instance, here we have a bucket, and it's filled with employees made up of both genders. And if you took all the genders out of this bucket and split them, so now we have two buckets, males, females.
There'd be more money in the male bucket.
More money in the male bucket. And that's what people say, which, by the way, is true. Is true.
Absolutely.
There's more male CEOs. There's more males pretty much with a bunch of things.
Well, for sure in aviation, it's still true in the regular workforce because there are more males, period.
100%.
And there have, by the way, even though hiring is skewed toward females, statistically that it's still skewed toward males, isn't it? Because there are more males in the business.
Well, I don't know if it's skewed as much as it is that's all they have to hire.
Well, you couldn't hire 100 men and 100 women.
Right.
Okay, actually, that you could do. You couldn't hire 10,000 men and 10,000 women because there aren't 10,000 women. But you could hire 5,000 women and 10,000 men, and somebody would say that's skewed toward men.
Somebody would say that's skewed towards women.
Well, exactly, because all 100% of the women got hired and 1/100th of the men got hired.
Exactly.
Right. So there is...
And that is not equality.
No, that is not equality.
Good.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's not equality. Some would say that's equity.
What do you mean by equity? Define it.
Equity is the thing that opposes oppression.
Well, that's a whole... Okay.
But unfortunately, it's sort of oppressive.
It's very oppressive, yes.
So you'd have, the way I've seen it in a chart in diversity and inclusion training that every employee goes through, by the way, I'm not special, in case there are any speculation that I specifically deserved it. But there are, if everyone has a fair chance, they got to start from the same place. And you would have to take measures to make sure that they start from the same place. Now, a really good example, and I mean an excellent example of that, which makes a lot of sense, hopefully, to everyone listening, is that if you invite your friend over to your party to play video games and they don't know the rule, they will get crushed. Not because they're dumb, because no one told them the rules of the video game.
So the starting point was different.
The starting point was these people had video games, maybe money to get them, and this guy didn't. So you invited him over because he's your pal, and now he's terrible at video games. You think, oh, this kind of person is terrible at video games.
Right.
That is absolutely where we get a lot of racism, prejudice, and all those kinds of stuff. That is a beautiful example. That is a starting point place, and it references a starting point. It references even a solution, which is why I love it. Tell the guy the rules, get him some video games, and he'll be good at video games.
Right.
This is great.
Fair competition.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
It is a fair shot. That's equity, is
Yes.
pumping in some money to the base level. That's really good. Okay, that's video games. That's children. That is pretty base stuff. Now, you forward it along to the business, any specialized industry, and it's a little late to raise the starting place. I feel like people just give, I feel like the idea is to give more chances, or all the chances that are available, to people who wouldn't have had a fair starting chance. Now, I'm not really sure that fixes any problem, or if it just puts people who aren't qualified or as qualified in the same place.
The latter.
Probably. Now, if your qualifying bar is much lower than everyone's obvious achievements, then that might be basically equity from the top, which is pretty offensive, actually, because
Right.
it's just, look, it's the same thing as oppression does. In the hopes, it's like trickle-down economics in a way. You make more of one demographic in a higher place, that there should be that opportunity for people who are younger. And surely, don't get me wrong, that's not ineffectual. If you ask a woman in Taiwan, a little girl, what she wants to be, she might tell you, actually, that she wants to be a flight attendant at China Airlines. She might tell you that.
Right.
Because they're idolized. These are big, and they're larger than life. They're beautiful women, and all these things. They exude all these values of the culture. They're the essence, the manifestation of the female of the species. They are the woman. This is who you want to be. No kidding. Went out with a woman who told me she wanted to be a flight attendant when she grew up. I said, oh no. Well, what'd you do instead? She's a brain surgeon.
Whoa.
She was disappointed not to be a flight attendant because she wasn't tall enough, right?
I believe you.
But now she's a brain surgeon.
I had to be a brain
unfortunately.
surgeon. Oh, well.
Yeah, it like as a second choice, she managed to make it all the way through all of that and be a brain surgeon. I met lawyers the same. I met, every specialized profession you want. It seemed like they at first wanted to be a flight attendant. So I thought, well, why didn't you want to be a pilot? Why is it a flight attendant thing? You're like, oh, women aren't pilots. It doesn't even cross their mind. This is a huge problem in the world of equity and equality. So yes, you do need a role model up there, and you got to stick some in. In fact, you got to stick a lot in so they get exposed. Is that tipping the scales? Yes. Is it a benefit that outweighs the unfortunate results? Maybe so. In fact, many people would say definitely so. I'm not the authority on this, so I'm just trying to present that moment. And I want to go on and tell you that when I was in Taiwan, I knew a female who was a pilot, right? And she went through what sounds like a 50s style hell in getting hired, which tells you a lot of things. Number one, that we've come a very long way with the measures we've taken. So we've proven our point in a lot of places. Now, I don't know which methods have worked, but we have come a long way. When she sat down in front of the vice president of operations to get her job, he tried to talk her out of it. This is after she became qualified as a pilot. He tried to talk her out of it and say, gosh, you're so beautiful. Wouldn't you just like to be a flight attendant? Your life would be so much better. Your life would be so much better.
That's disgusting that people treat women like that.
It's just so awful. I mean, I am lost for words to say how disgusted I was when I heard that. I mean, I was kind of laughing like this because I couldn't believe that it was real. I can't believe. I mean, of course it happened. I'm not saying that I was given a false story. This happened, okay? So it's just, I mean, though it's unbelievable, you totally see it. When you live there, when you work there at that place,
it's happening.
This is a real story, I promise you, and I've seen crazier things than that.
Man.
So we have taken measures and that have been successful. The fact that we strive for that in the United States is a real testimony to how far we've come and where we're going. So I'm really glad for that. So I wonder now what steps we'll take in the right direction.
To make it a equal playing field?
To make it a fair competition, because that's what makes this country great, is a fair competition.
Let me ask you this.
One of the things that makes our country great, by the way.
If the airlines hired fairly, not based off gender, strictly based off who you are, your skills, your background, whatever it might be.
Okay, so let's start with the minimum qualifications.
Whatever. Take whatever airlines look at. I've never hired pilots.
Sure.
Take whatever. I'm sure there's a criteria, and it's different for every airline. Take whatever the criteria is and throw the gender out of it. Right?
Okay, yeah.
Great. Would we have less female pilots getting hired than we currently have? I think yes. Okay. So here's the question. If airlines did that.
By the way, I think yes, because they wouldn't get as many interviews, because on paper they tend not to have the experience, which is a self-licking ice cream cone of reasoning.
Not even that. There's literally a lesser number of female pilots.
There's also that.
That's pretty much all. They're as qualified or more qualified.
So you're saying
I'm just talking a numbers game.
All pilots equal.
All pilots equal. A numbers game.
There are 100 pilots who are men. Or 100 pilots, 90 of them are men, 10 of them are women, which is a gross exaggeration. It's probably closer to 93 and 7 or 95 and 5.
So it's a numbers game. So if the airlines strictly threw the gender thing out and hired as they do, would we have less females getting hired?
Yeah, we'd be literally 90% fewer females who are hired than hired.
There you go. Yeah. Easy. So question, if airlines did that, what would be the real true way to reach equality when it comes to more? And by the way, that's not equality, but if you want to call a equal physical number of pilots, males and females, what and on who is that responsibility laid? Is it on the airline to hire more females, or is it on more females to become pilots?
So I ask you, how many females want to become pilots?
Oh, here's the thing.
How many males want to become pilots, and why?
In that same breath, I will first of all, having the desire to pilot this big ship from one edge of the country to the next. You remember we talked about a spectrum of masculinity falls way on the masculine side. Okay. Does this mean that there's no females who wake up with that desire? Heck no. There's badass F-16, F-17, F-18, F-35, F-22 pilots who will kick the butt of any male pilot we know.
I know a badass F-18 pilot whose call sign is Perm.
Perm?
Because of her curly hair, obviously. So her call sign is Perm.
There's some badass female pilots.
She is probably going to NASA.
Dude.
Obviously, people are talented and capable.
We're done with the days where we think women can't. Women could do anything they want to do.
Correct.
Everyone knows that.
Let me stop you there and focus on that. We're done with those days. Why?
What do you
Why
mean?
are we done with those days? I mean, because we made huge... How come? Like, what were the methods?
How did they prove?
Yeah, how did we leave those days behind us?
Because there's not one thing that you tell me a woman can't. There's few things left. Yes, we haven't had a female president of the United States.
Oh, okay, never mind. Never mind what gaps are left to be filled. We've left behind the idea that they can't be the president.
Right, because there's not one thing you could.
How did we achieve that?
First of all, I think women have a lot to do with it and a lot to thank for that, because I don't think it was the males who got together and said, let's make females do all the stuff they want to do and be like us. I don't think that's the case. So I think, first of all, I think it has, females are, again, I'm not an expert in history, probably a lot to do with that, fighting for it in whatever the various methods are. But also, just you talking before with this Taiwanese pilot. Dude, when I hear stuff females have to go through, I feel for them. I'm so thankful I don't have to be a female. You know the stuff, even today, you're a 13-year-old girl, you tell your dad, I want to be a pilot. Your dad will probably look at you and say, go play with your dolls. Do you know how much that sucks? Because think about that.
That's terrible.
You're starting out with a disadvantage.
That's so many disadvantages.
It sucks. I feel for them. It sucks. And when I hear these stories of people talking that way about women, I'll give you an example. Nurses. Let's flip it around. Sure. Nurses for years was female, right? Majority female.
Correct.
Right? My brother's in nursing school right now. He's a dad and he has 3 kids and he's going to support his family. Imagine he had to feel weird about becoming a nurse. That's disgusting, right? He's going to do something that he's clearly passionate about. He wants to be a nurse and not something else. Passionate about nursing.
Heck, let's go ahead and turn this table all the way around then.
Yeah, he's passionate about it.
What about the jobs that are historically feminine in nature that now, say, straight males want to go do?
Take me.
For example.
I've been a flight attendant for 8 years.
That's right.
Yeah.
And did you feel weird about being a flight attendant?
I felt zero weird, but...
Zero weird. Hang
Zero.
on a second.
Zero.
Describe... I believe you because you're telling me.
But I'm not one to feel weird. I'm the wrong person to ask.
You're the wrong person to ask. So describe for everyone who's hearing us, like you and me basically, and maybe some other guy we emailed this podcast to, but describe for all 3 of us the demographic of flight attendants. Go.
The demographic of flight attendants.
Divided by gender first.
Are you talking about gender? Okay, gender first.
Sure.
These are all guesses. I'm going...
Ballpark it, no problem.
I'm going 70% 75% industry-wide, 75% female. 70% female, 30% male. Lots of males these days.
All right, great. So let's wind it back 8 years to when you started.
Probably a little less.
Okay, so 20%?
Sure.
It's an easier number to divide.
Sure.
Possibly, depending on where you go with this next.
Sure, 20%.
How many... Okay, so what do most of those men have in common?
So now we're entering into different ways of splitting it. So now we're looking at sexuality.
Oh, okay. So that was your go-to, not mine, but you said it and not I.
I'm asking.
Because you have the inside track. That was the first thing that jumped to your mind.
No, of course. No, so let's call it what it is.
Please.
So we started with gender.
All
we
right.
said 70-30.
All right.
Sexuality. We take the 30 out of the men.
All
What
right.
percentage are gay? What percentage are straight? I'm going 70-30. Same, probably. That's my guess.
70 gay, 30 straight?
Yes.
All right. So as a straight male, you'd be 1 in 10 of the workforce.
Yes.
All right. Do you think there are 1 in 10 flight attendants are straight males?
I think.
Let's say they are.
Yeah.
Why not?
I do.
All right.
Yeah.
So 10 to 1. Okay. And you didn't have to feel weird about that. Even though 30 years ago there were 0 straight males or 0 males, period.
I didn't feel... Here's the thing, though. I'll tell you why I'm the wrong person to ask. I think if you're someone who feels weird working in a group of which the majority male are gay, you wouldn't become a flight attendant to begin with. And so
there's some selection bias in this.
Yeah, so if I became a flight attendant and I flip and love it and I have nothing bad to say about it and every person I've ever worked with is amazing and I have 0 problem working, I don't care what people's sex. I don't care if you identify as an it. For all I care, we're serving Coke, and then we go home. You know what I mean? Like that. I don't care about any of these things. So I'm probably the last person to ask that question because there was not only 0 weirdness. I have so much fun working with. I mean, it's just incredible. You meet these different people and from different parts of the world, and people have different stories, and it's an amazing job. So I'm zero weirdness, 100%, 100%.
So you're making it hard to turn the tables because you're saying that, but let me ask you then, if you're a female, is it then more difficult to work in an environment of a bunch of males than a male who works in the environment of a bunch of homosexual males or females?
I think so.
Okay, so then in that case, we can say with great certainty, because this is the only example I could think of.
Can I say why I think so?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
It's my guess. I think it is the case because males, unlike female, right? And I'm curious what you think, if you'd agree with me on this one. Who would have a more difficult time being equal with a male with a female? Think back 70s captain of an airplane. A male with a female or a female with a male? Just I'm asking you, who do you think? Take a guess. There's no right or wrong here. We're both not experts.
For me to say that it would be easier for a male to feel equality with a female than vice versa would be, I mean, almost as arrogant as the pilot I am. Because
wait a minute,
that supposes that men have every quality necessary to do anything a woman can do, and we shouldn't feel very challenged to rise to that occasion, whereas women should have to face more challenges to be equal to males. Now, wait.
I'm not sure what you said there.
Okay.
So I'm just strictly asking.
I reject the premise.
Picture a 1955 captain sitting in the left seat.
Okay.
He is male.
He is, guaranteed.
Take everything you read in the books of 1950s aviation captains.
Sure.
Okay?
In that era.
He's in that seat. He's wearing his flippin' hat while he flies. He's flying all over himself. He's like a man's man captain.
He is.
Great. Here shows up
He loves himself. He's so sure of it.
Here shows up Christina. Little, cute Christina. Blonde hair. Her pilot has way too big on her face. She's wearing pants. The whole pilot shows up, cute makeup, and she shows up and says, "Hi, I'm Christina." Before this dude could figure out if she's a flight attendant or not, she says, "Hi, I'm Christina. I'll be your co-pilot, the other pilot for the entire trip." In that moment, and don't go to the whole, yay, she's a female, be an exciting trip. Just strictly in terms of, in that moment, this dude, would he have an easier or more difficult time than if the captain was female and the FO that showed up was male? Take your guess. And whatever you say, I respect.
I can tell you with experience from being the captain with a female first officer and being a first officer with a female captain.
You've had both, okay.
Yeah, we've been in both kind of scenarios over here. Maybe that's bad description. Bad way to say it. But nevertheless, having been in both seats with a female in the opposing seat, the dynamic of each one is different. I don't know that it's different for reasons that I am producing or reasons that they are producing.
Interesting. So you two are the wrong person to ask.
Possibly.
Got it.
I'll tell you with great certainty, the best co-pilots I had at China Airlines were statistically heavily weighted toward females. Heavily.
Why?
Great question. Also, I'm not entirely sure that it was statistically heavily weighted toward females of the worst ones I also had, because there were just, statistically so few of them. So even if you had one that stuck out as just awful, but let's say they were equally bad on the male side as the female side. If they were equally bad, and let's not delve too deep into who could be worse by quantity, because there just weren't that many women. But it speaks major volume about my flight deck that the females were definitely choice pilots. Kind of every time you could guarantee it, minus the one or two exceptions who were just kind of terrible, like bad at everything kind of thing. That wasn't exclusive to women in any stretch, by the way. So I'm thinking of my top 5 co-pilots for my entire 3-year contract at Cal. And I promise you, I can see 4 of their faces. I can think of the other 2's names. Heavily weighted toward females. Why is that? It's because they were better at what they did? I don't actually know. But we just got along better. So there might be a lot to, the very simple dynamics of male female than that are, or in fact, pilot co-pilot, that are more important than someone's individual flying skills, which would possibly lend itself to forcing the issue in your hiring, because generally you'll meet those skills. Now, I don't know if that'll flip when people go to the left seat, or if some people were kind of rushed into the job and they weren't quite ready or didn't get their time, and now they're being flushed over to the left. But we're now seeing that with men and women.
Yeah.
So it's going to be hard to parse that out or even tell. So I get back to your original question. I think, would it be harder for a female in the 50s to appear as the first one?
Let me ask the question a different way.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, would a male have an easier time in the 50s? Let's go back to the 50s, because that's an easy way to think about this, because today everyone's like...
I don't think a male would have an easy time being a flight attendant in the 50s.
Right, but let me ask the question differently. In the 50s, would a male have an easier time admitting to the world that a female could do everything he can in terms of performing a job? I'm not talking about lifting a weight amount. I'm not talking about those things. I'm talking about in terms of I could be president, you could be president, I could be a pilot. I could be
let's
an
take
astronaut.
Pilots out of it, because no one can be a better pilot than me. And that's how all of them think, right?
Let's talk about jobs. I could be an astronaut, you could be an astronaut. Like, I could do this, you could do. Would a male have an easier time admitting that females can too? Or would a female have an easy time admitting that males can't do? That's almost an easy one, John.
Yeah, that's not even a question. I mean, it's not even about admitting. It'd be about like having someone believe it.
Right.
At
and
that
so
point.
To answer the question, I think that is why women are up against and have been up against what they are. Not because they can't. Like we said, we've already proved they proved what they need to prove. Not me. I'm not female. They proved. They've gone to space. They've done it all. We get it. But I think the reason they're up against all that is because they have males to deal with in the world. And males, unfortunately, I don't know if it's part of what makes us male. I don't know what it is. It's beyond my scope. But I think that has a lot to do with it. I very much don't think the level of ease that a female would have in admitting that a male could do everything she can, I don't think that's shared equally between men and women.
No, certainly not, because that's not the cultural narrative anywhere I know. Well, I take it back. Look, there are such things as gender roles, and we're always talking about our Western philosophies and our Western this and our Western that, but the male is not necessarily superior to the female in everything or even anything, depending on what culture you dip into. I think we would serve ourselves in our country, in our culture, to look into the opposite example, where like we have a matriarchal society or women who do the things that we classically associate with men doing here. I'm thinking of a tribe, actually more than one, who raise their children very differently. Women raise the children. Women are in charge. Women select a male, get rid of the male. Women raise their children not with their mate, but with their brothers.
What?
That's it. Women are in charge.
It's real tribe?
Yeah, I didn't make this up.
Where are they? Who are these?
I'm not an anthropologist.
So you know they exist, you don't know like where?
Yeah, I read about them in anthropology classes.
Whoa.
So, this is going back some
charge.
time. But yeah, this is a place where this is how they do things. They just do things categorically different than we do.
Imagine a world where you're a dude wanting to be a pilot and all the females around you are saying, hey, fine, go be a nurse, go do something
Exactly.
else.
Sorry, you can't. That's not for you.
Just think about that, how much that would suck.
It would be awful, right? It would.
Think about it.
So, for me, I feel like that would be awful. Now, does our society work one way better or one way another? Okay, now we're like into the weeds, but
yeah,
that is one way of doing things that they do. And there aren't that many of them, which may say something.
I also don't know if I agree with that. I think to a large extent, lines have been blurred. On the one hand, men and women have always been and will always be different, period. On the other hand...
Until we're no longer this kind of human.
Well, on the other hand, as time went on, fast forward to 2022, we do live in a society where the opportunities of men and women is vastly different than what it was 100 years ago.
True.
Does that mean men and women are no longer different?
Certainly not.
Good. And that's where people get the lines blurred. The fact that a female and male could both go to space, many people get that confused with, oh, they're now the same. Not true. Men are men, women are women. We have cultivated a society in which both of these different things have the opportunity to do these bunch of stuff.
So is it taboo if a woman wants to be, is it more taboo if say a collegiate aged female would,
What's a collegiate?
say university aged
Collegiate? I've never heard that word.
collegiate athlete?
Collegiate athlete. Let me real quick crawl from under my big rock.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. It's almost like you didn't live here for a length of time. So
That was pretty amazing.
an 18 to 22-year-old female plays sports or doesn't want anything to do with sports.
What do you mean?
What is more taboo? A woman,
a 22-year-old female playing sports or not wanting to do this day and age? Equally not taboo.
Equally not taboo.
Yes.
Okay, so what about in 1960?
I'm assuming I wasn't living
Surely
then.
a woman playing sports is taboo.
I would
We have
assume.
softball because of
Right,
that.
I would assume so.
Right, this
Yes.
is a relic.
Yes.
Women surely could play baseball.
Yeah.
Right, come on.
Yeah.
But they play softball instead.
Yes.
That is certainly an artifact of the
Yes.
fact that women were not allowed to play and given something easier to hit and all this garbage.
Yes.
I mean, I guess the truth is I don't know the history of softball, but yeah, I think the point stands whether that step is.
Where's the word soft come from? I get the ball part.
Softball and hardball, I'm not really entirely sure, honestly.
That's
So
so
let me
interesting.
leave that behind because I'm just guessing. But it's pretty obvious that now it is not taboo for a woman to be playing sports in college.
Right.
Is it taboo for a woman to think that women have better things to do?
What do you mean?
I guess it's taboo for anyone to assign, in this country, to assign a role to someone based on their gender.
What do you mean?
Okay. Imagine you read on paper and you don't know the author. A woman should be at home. A woman should take care of her man.
Okay.
A woman should, etc.
Okay.
Now, there's like a piece of masking tape over the author's name,
Okay.
and I'm about to pull it back.
Okay.
Now, do you think that's going to be a male who said that or a female who said that?
Equally not sure. It could be very 50-50.
Okay, so it could be 50-50.
Yeah.
These days it could be 50-50.
Very much 50-50.
Right, so there is a legitimate perspective that gender roles are important. And males aren't the only one who have that vision.
Gender roles are important to some people.
Some people
assign a higher level of importance to gender roles than others.
Right.
Some people don't assign any. I'm not here to tell anyone how to think. I can only speak for myself and how I see things. But as far as I'm concerned and from my perspective, and back to what we talked about, men and women are so different to the point where if you're a man and you want to become a woman, here's how different they are. You got to chop things off. You got to get implants. You got to start, going under a hormone treatment.
You take dramatic steps.
It's dramatic. Here's how different men and women are. Dramatically different.
Thanks for that. I think we got that point. So then good. Because I want to walk back from that into that statement about gender roles.
Okay.
So we acknowledge that men and women are different.
Vastly.
Every part of our conversation has had to acknowledge that as a base level.
And by the way, and this is a given, but I'll throw it in there. We're vastly the same too.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And these differences that manifest are minimal in the scale of a person's 100-year life.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Or 50-year life.
But this is where the
Or 5-year
conversation.
life.
But this too, it's impossible to say. Yes, men and women are different, but if you specifically talk about a topic, you have to very much define what are you looking to figure out, whether or not we're the same.
I think we're zeroing in on it then, because men don't give birth, as I understand it.
Of course.
So also we have evolved as a species. Children really need their mothers.
Okay.
Pardon me.
So polite.
Pardon me.
You gave me a double pardon me. Beginning and end.
Right. So children need their mothers. They also need their fathers.
Right.
But for different reasons.
100%.
Now there's no getting around some biological things here. I wouldn't even know why we'd want to get around them.
Right.
But say we wanted to get around them, we'd have to get around them.
Right.
They exist. We can. I think everyone can acknowledge that.
Right.
So if we start there and say in the context of, and if we don't extend it too far, we could maybe all agree.
Mm.
So I think maybe we've concluded, or we can conclude, I hope, that if we don't overreach about the things on which we agree, because we all have so much in common,
right,
vastly more so than we have in different.
100%.
If we can all just start there and go one context at a time, we could maybe arrive at a place where we're not overextending our points of view on what people should and shouldn't do. For example, a baby needs its mother.
Right.
For a variety of reasons. First, to be born. Second, to feed.
I don't have any milk to give it. I don't have any milk to give it.
Right, so you can get around that. Someone's got to feed this thing. Anyway, you still at least have to be born. So somewhere between having to be born and learning things at home, whatever that means, somewhere between those two, you don't have to say a woman has to be the responsible party. Which means you definitely don't have to say a woman must stay at home, raise the kids till they're 20, whatever, or 10 or 15. You don't have to draw a line so far away, because this is where we get in trouble, I think, with what a gender role, what the value of a gender role,
right,
and what is expected of a person. The projection of that gender role into the future, into contexts that are irrelevant.
Right.
So a woman has to birth a child. Start there. That does not mean a woman can't have a job, which is what it used to mean, right?
Right.
We used to extend that all the way into, well, women can't do this, women can't do that, because of women had to do something else earlier. Well, I think we could eliminate that, maybe, and just walk our way back into the thing we agree on, and then slowly walk ourselves forward together.
100%. And I almost want to say it's a given, but apparently it's not, because we do very much live in a world. Yeah, you tell people,
culture is pretty heavy. Culture is heavy enough they can tell you, all right, so a person is 18, and they say a woman is 18 and says, I do want a job, I do want this, I do like that, I think this way, I must be a man. Culture is that heavy.
Which is horrible.
Well, it's kind of crazy.
Which is horrible.
I'll beg your forgiveness again, because now I need to be right back.
Pee, 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 pee.
So sorry, pardon the interruption. I think we had just arrived. I was doing the pee-pee dance over here. I think we had just arrived at, if we can change people's attitudes, or allow people their own attitudes, and allow people to live the lives they want to live without sort of cramming down their throats what they should and shouldn't be doing. Well, I guess then we'd all be libertarian. But we'd also maybe go a long way to address equality in the workplace.
Yeah, there's a
equal
lot,
opportunity, I should say.
There's a lot to all this. The downside to all this, unfortunately, is that people are quick to get defensive. And the problem with getting defensive is you don't get to hear the other person all the way through. You don't get to hear their thoughts. Did this ever happen to you, John, where someone was saying something in the beginning of the sentence or the first 20 seconds of them talking, in your mind, you look at them and you go, this guy is not only stupid, they're beyond stupid, and the response I'm going to give them is going to slap them so hard and put them in their place that I can't wait. That's the thought. And then they keep talking for 20 more seconds, and then at the end of the next 20 seconds, all that starts shifting in your head because they said a few more things. And now you start thinking to yourself, holy cow, whoa, now I hear them in a completely different way. Now they're saying something that I didn't even see coming in the first 20 seconds. And by the time they're done with the third 20 seconds, you're sitting there going, holy cow, I never saw the world this way, and I never thought about this. That ever happened to you? I exaggerated, right?
A little. I mean, the first part to the last part, where someone says something let's say unexpected, hopefully unexpected, because now I think they're an idiot. I am quick to think that people are stupid from time to time. Now, I realize that is, not appropriate almost in any context. So I try not to judge a person generally, but even if I were, I don't then go to my response is what I'm going to, I can't wait to respond to this person, put them in their place.
I exaggerated.
I fully skip that part and go instead to
You don't do that too?
It's Southern people aren't necessarily all judgmental.
You don't do bless what's it? Bless your heart. You don't do that. You don't sit there thinking I'm gonna respond.
I'd be lying to you if I said I was angel-hearted about the thing though, because sometimes I give it like 5 or 10 seconds, and I. In my soul, I'm rolling my eyes.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Okay, good. In your soul, you're rolling your eyes, and then 20 more seconds in, you're no longer rolling your eyes.
Yeah, and the only way out of that is to recognize that I don't know what they're going to finish saying and what they've been through.
There you go.
Because disdain is the quickest way out of a conversation.
There you go. So back to what we're saying. If someone is defensive too soon, the price of that is you don't get to hear me all the way through. And if you don't get to hear me all the way through, really, you don't have what to shut down because you haven't heard what I have to say.
Well, if your goal is to shut someone down, then that's the huge problem you'd run into is you don't give someone to shut.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's the thing. The downside of all this is we live in a society where you start talking, someone hears something. If someone hears you say that, and by the way, we're talking about the men and women, male-female pay gap, right? If someone hears you say that you believe X, Y, Z on the pay gap and it's different than what they believe, 99% of the time, there's no further conversation to be had. Unfortunately, and that's
these are sensitive issues. Apparently, people get sensitive about some things.
Yeah, and there's a huge price to that, and the price to that is no one gets to hear your thoughts all the way through.
Which then goes to a much bigger price, which is that people can't possibly arrive at a reasonably good conclusion ever because they're so stuck in their own heads and their own experiences, and they can't learn. Period. So in fact, we devolve and become dumber because we can't listen to each other.
Exactly. So, is there a pay gap? Absolutely. Here's the question. The question isn't whether or not there's a pay gap. The question is why there's a pay gap. That's the good question.
Well, the next question is then, shouldn't there be a pay gap?
What do you mean? Meaning, should we not have one? Is that what you're asking?
Look, if we break this all the way down into its individual parts,
I think the moment you claim that there should not be a pay gap, you are claiming that there should not be equality.
And and say that I'm claiming not as many people will be in the workforce for as long.
What do you mean?
Now, I'm going to use an extreme example here.
Sure.
All men work, all women do not work.
Okay.
So, if we are measuring pay gap by the number of dollars made by men between the ages of 15 and 50.
Okay.
In order for there to be equality in pay and not a pay gap, everyone would have to work the same number of years at the same type of job.
Okay.
Is that something we should be striving for?
No.
Okay. So we're saying there should be a pay gap?
Well, I don't think
because we're definitely not saying there should be a pay difference. Like there should be inequality in pay. We're not saying that for sure.
I don't think we should strive for anything is my point.
Okay. All right. So then there should be a pay gap.
I'm not saying there should be a pay gap.
There should not be a pay gap?
There should not be a situation where we are eliminating a pay gap. Meaning a pay gap isn't something we should kick away.
Okay, so
pay gap is not a problem.
Go on.
What's the problem with the pay gap?
You tell me. I'm not sure there is a problem.
Take you and I. Forget male, female.
In the ideal world, there isn't a problem with a pay gap because you and I will do different jobs and get paid differently, and we're not being paid equally.
But again, remember what we're talking about. We're not talking about the female coworker of yours who flies planes too. We're talking about, remember the buckets we talked about?
No, I just described them. The same number of men, the same number of women working.
But that's not true.
Should it be true?
Of course not.
Okay, so there should be a pay gap.
No, I'm not saying there's a difference between saying there should be a pay gap to the pay gap shouldn't be something we eliminate. Do you hear the difference?
Of course I do.
I'm not sitting here saying there should be a pay gap. If we naturally end up in a world where we don't have a pay gap, I'm not against that.
Well, we're naturally in that world now.
No,
where
we're
we
in
have
a
a pay gap.
Right. I'm not against it.
Okay.
A pay gap is not the problem. A pay gap is simply a byproduct of reality. What is reality? Here's reality. You ready for reality?
Hit me.
Reality is you talk to most women I talk to. I don't know what women you talk to. Most women I talk to.
Whichever ones will talk to me.
Most women I talk to. You know what they want to be when they get married? They won't be stay-at-home moms.
Really?
They do. They won't be stay-at-home moms. I would say 7 out of 10 women I talk to won't be stay-at-home moms.
Where do you find all these people?
Dude, it's women who live in the world with you. Most women, the vast majority of women want... Dude, women have... Why do you think women give birth? I don't know what came first, chicken or the egg. Is it the woman's desire to have children? And because of that, we made her be the one to carry them for 9 months? Or is it the other way around? Who cares? The fact is, women have a deeper desire to have children. It's in nature. It's just like nature made grass green.
Okay, well, if we're going to go back to nature, let's talk about some things that we do know rather than things that we're imagining.
I'm not imagining anything.
No, well, we're imagining the origination.
Oh,
we're speculating on the
got it.
origination there of the chicken and the egg, but let's look at lions. They're fun. We can look at primates next. I feel like we should.
But before we do that, I just want to make sure that we understand this pay gap thing. The pay gap exists. It also is not the problem as much as the pay gap in and of it. The pay gap is weight loss. Weight loss is not a thing as much as as is a byproduct and a side effect of hard work, both with eating right and working out. Pay gap is not a thing. It's a byproduct. It's a side effect of reality in the workplace. Reality in the workplace dictates it shows a reality in which more males than females will work A, many jobs that females won't, B, longer hours than females would, C, males, forget having children, male over female naturally have less of a tendency to be in a relationship, in a loving. Men want to not be tied to anything, right? So if you think about that, a man who's out there and wants to commit to nothing has the freedom to make more money. A woman who's in a relationship and she's loving on her boyfriend, relationships are limiting no matter how you slice it. So there's so many fascinating ways where you could slice this pie and say, okay, here's why the bucket of the men is filled with more money. But that doesn't mean that...
So why do we care that the bucket of men is filled with more money?
I don't. Do you?
Personally, don't care. I don't.
Who cares?
I think it's a bogus stat.
Who cares?
So if that's how we're defining pay gap, then I think we should...
But here's what we should talk about.
Way.
But here's what we should talk about. Does a woman... And here's what we should not only talk about, but fight for. We need to make sure that every woman on the planet has just as much ability to go swim in the men's bucket of money. You don't want to be in a relationship? Go make a bunch of money. You want to become an astronaut? Go become an astronaut. You don't want to be a stay-at-home mom? Go play with the boys. I have no problem with that. I'll fight for that. I think that's what a healthy society should be. But the fact that most naturally want to not be and do what the boys do, and many want to be stay-at-home moms, doesn't mean they're lazy. It means that they're female, and the majority of females want to do things that males don't. There's no other way to slice it.
So then why do we count these bogus statistics? Why are we doing that? Is it for
It's
show?
not us. I'm not counting it.
I say we. Collectively, Americana counts a lot of statistics.
It's victimhood. It's victimhood. The more things I can point to and say, this is why I'm a nothing or nobody or not as successful as I wish I were, the better I feel about myself. And so if a woman did not have those buckets to point at, she would be left with a mirror in which she had to stare at herself and question, I'm not in a relationship. I have all the time in the day that this dude has, and I'm not making any money. Why is that? Now, we talked about this before. We do live in a society, and I hate this, and we talked about how much this is disgusting. Unfortunately, to this day and age, women, and it's not even from bad places. Like dads, I don't think a dad is a nasty person for telling his daughter, don't worry about a pilot, maybe think of becoming a brain surgeon. I don't think he's a bad person, but I think it's ingrained in us, unfortunately, and I think that should change. Women could and have and proved and should do whatever the heck they want. Whatever they want to do. Whatever they want to do. But so they have a lot of that to fight, and I feel for them, and it's disgusting, and I'm with you on that.
So I'm glad you mentioned it. That is a vast change in attitude. You would never tell your daughter something like that. Don't worry about this. Go play with your dolls. You would never say that.
Heck
right.
No.
And
I told my mom when I was 15.
Uh-huh.
Sorry, the last thing I'll say. I'm so passionate about this. I told my mom when I was probably 4, I want to be a pilot. It happened to be a pilot with me and not a generally feminine profession, female profession. But one of the biggest things that got me to do it was all the support that my mom, the excitement of my mom in it with me and said, oh my gosh, you'll be a pilot. Let's do it. You could do it. My mom believed in me being a pilot during times where honestly, if you caught me alone in a room, I would laugh and admit to you, I don't think I could do it. But my mom thought I could do it. Now, whether or not she thought I could do it or just put that face to me, who cares? She did it. And I think it's important. And I don't care if you're a female, male. If you want to be an astronaut, your parents should better sit there and say, there's a line, right? I don't think you should tell your kids to do anything that they can't do, because at some point it could backfire. But generally speaking, we've proved it. Have there been women astronauts? Heck yes. If you want it bad enough, could you do it? 100%. 100%.
So if this is the right way to live, and we think that it is because it's our generation, what then? So what happened between our fathers and grandfathers' generations and ours that allowed us this perspective? We didn't just snap our. Someone didn't snap their finger and say, "I wish my kids thought differently than I did," and then bestowed upon them a different way of thinking, because that's generally not how it goes. However you're thinking now is how you'll bestow upon your children.
But someone told me something last night to this. We were talking about, I forget what it was, but it was something where definitely like 100 years ago, the society thought differently about that issue, which is most of the issues today. I'm sure every generation.
Okay.
And it's interesting. And what this person was telling me, she said, if you today think differently than a person who is 70 and comes from a different time, back to our fair competition, you can't hold them accountable and fault them for thinking that way. You know why? Because if you were back then with them there, you would think the same way.
Not to mention, the younger person isn't necessarily right. Let's like wind this way back and go back to like let's go over to Asia.
Flip it around.
The younger person is usually wrong.
Flip it around. It doesn't matter. The reality of the matter, the fact of the matter is flip it around. It doesn't matter. The 70 would probably think like the 20.
Have you ever seen a 5-year-old smoking a cigarette?
I think I've watched that video.
Yeah. Because that's what you look like to someone who's 60, right?
Yeah, there you go. That's one way to put it.
Yeah, you look like a total idiot. And half the things we're probably saying are things that they addressed many years ago, but
100%.
Came to a different conclusion based on different experiences.
100%. But to be clear, I can't talk or speak to someone, not only 70 years ago, but someone who maybe grew up and lived in a completely different environment than I don't know what their
without
experience
assigning
was.
blame or fault or even saying that they were wrong for their time, without any of that. What changed between then and now that allows us this perspective?
Boy, that's a good question. I really don't know. The only thing I would say is that I think the biggest thing that changed, and I'm not saying this is a headline thing, and I'm sure there's like stuff within it that are more specific, but I think the biggest thing that changed has to be technology. That's a headline term. It's a very general answer. And within that, if you want to get specific, but I think more so than ever, a person who's 12 and a person who's 50 and a person who's 80 have an equal platform on which to sound their voice. And that's a new thing with social media. Flip that around to politics. A person who's in the White House and a person who's out the White House could have the same size platform.
So are people...
So I think naturally that creates room for people to more easily and be more accessible to one another to spark these conversations.
So are people communicating more, or are they communicating less?
People are communicating more in that realm. I'm not, obviously
in
you're
that
not
context.
meaning, in that context,
Right.
yes.
Because we well know that people don't talk to each other because they're so easily offended and
100%.
so judgmental about.
Theoretically,
the
I could have a Twitter war with Elon Musk right now, where 50
Right.
years ago I couldn't.
You'd never talk to the guy.
I'd never talk to the guy. So I have a channel of communication that didn't exist. So I know it's a headline thing, but I think technology as a whole definitely must have had it provided a space for all this to unfold.
All right. So have you heard the study on the jelly bean count?
No.
All right, you got a jar of jelly beans sitting right in front of you, or
Mhm.
beans of any kind. But let's say jelly beans because it's a fair and it's fun, or a carnival or something. Say at the carnival, and you're allowed to guess how many jelly beans are in the bucket or bin or bowl or whatever.
Okay.
All right. The chances that you're going to be right are pretty low.
Right.
You might get close.
Right.
And I'll guess.
Okay.
Having no idea what you guessed.
Right.
I'll guess later. I'll come by this container of jelly beans and guess a different number. More than
Okay.
likely a different number.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I'm also going to be wrong. Just as wrong as you were. I could be right. Not very likely.
Right.
1,000 people will do it. We'll all be equally wrong. Or equally likely to be wrong.
Right.
In a world of decent guessers and bad guessers.
Mm-hmm.
But would you believe that when you add them all up and divide them all out, so we're taking the average guess, it's pretty close to the number of jelly beans in the container.
Yes.
This is extraordinary. This should tell us that we should communicate in an even way with one another, because we may just arrive at the correct conclusion.
That's a very interesting way to put it, yeah.
Right. We shouldn't be trying to silence each other, even if we believe. So you guess 1 and I guess 1 million. There's definitely neither of those.
Yeah.
You're just as wrong as I am. I can say there's 1 million jelly beans in there, and you can say there's no jelly beans in there. We'd both be idiots for saying so. But without both of us talking and allowed to have that opinion and considered, then we won't ever get to the right answer.
That's I love it. I've never heard that, and that's so interesting. Yeah, I'm with you. If we took the average of everyone, where would we end up?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So where would we end up if we took the average of everyone today? Let's pick an issue instead of all of them.
I think if we took the average of everyone, this is straight up a guess. If we took the average of everyone today, we would end up, if we took a spectrum of, and we have to call it something, otherwise we would have nothing to really, you wouldn't know what I mean here, but let's say left and right, took a spectrum. I think if we took a sum of everyone today, truly how they feel and what they think, we would end up more on the right, the average.
What? I'm sorry, I don't know what the right and the left are in this country anymore.
Oh, so for instance, if we're calling the left being the side that goes, men and women are the same, the pay gap is horrible, all these issues that sort of fall.
If we leave it to people guessing what's on the right or having to know what's on the right and to the left, that I don't know. Say I don't know anything about the right and the left.
So take what we talked about tonight. You could put on a dress. You could undergo surgery and procedures and the whole thing. I'll call you a she, blah, blah, blah. But could you change your gender? No, you can't. So people who believe you can't actually change your gender will probably fall more on the right. People who believe that you can change your gender, people will fall on the left.
So in your estimation, are we a kind of right-leaning country at the moment?
100%. And I think we always have been. In fact, the further back you go, the more right-leaning the left then were compared to today. That is 100% true.
Interestingly, if you go to Europe or something like that, the most right-leaning American or average right-leaning American, or sorry, take that back. The most average left-leaning of left-leaning Americans would look like a right-leaning European, according to
100%.
According to reports, let's say.
And I've yet to meet someone.
Wild.
And I've yet to meet someone who truly believes, I'm not talking, games, truly believes, convinced that a gender could be changed. I have met transgender people, I've spoken with them, who will admit to me and say, and that's basically why they say in the beginning, to begin with, I feel like I'm trapped in the wrong body. Keyword wrong. I was assigned the wrong gender, or a gender that I shouldn't have. So no one sits there and
How can that be confirmed?
What do you mean confirmed?
Biologically speaking. I mean, gender being a biological thing because the fix is physiological. Can it be physiologically confirmed that someone's in the wrong body?
You mean by the chromosomes?
By any mean. By any means.
Oh, you
all.
mean by the wrong body? No, it all comes down to the mind. Because guess when they don't feel like they're in the wrong body? When they're sleeping and the mind's not working. And it's all the mind. It's all the mind. When you're sleeping, you're not thinking that you're in the wrong body. When you wake up, you do. When you're awake and you walk around in the world, you do. But when you sleep, you don't. You might have a hard time falling asleep. It's like depression. I'm not depressed when I sleep. I'm depressed when I wake up. It all has to do with my mind. We live up here. We really live up here. Now, many times adjusting the outside makes this easier. So, for instance, take anorexia. Anorexia is up here, not here. This is the byproduct.
I think that you can be depressed when you sleep.
Could I be depressed when I sleep?
I do. I do think that.
That's a big
question.
Because
depressed is a physiological state. So your mind is, you are in that physiological state. Now, I'm not one for separating mind and body the way that people do. I personally am not.
Could a dead person
be depressed? Because the mind is part of the body.
Could a dead person be depressed?
I think a dead person's just dead.
So,
physiologically speaking.
Okay, so do you agree that sleep is I forget the percentage, but it's sort of a little bit, I'm partially...
Metaphorically, maybe, but physiologically, if you are not dead, that is different than being dead.
Is your brain working?
There's a hard line there.
Is your brain pumping in all cylinders as it does when you're awake during the day when you're sleeping?
I think there's more we need to learn, but the brain doesn't simply shut off because you're sleeping.
Does it work less?
That I don't know. It works differently. Different things are happening. But your brain does work when you're sleeping. Yeah,
but not to... I mean, part of why I need the sleep is to give my brain rest, no? Like to give it a chance to sort of like, okay...
Body. You need to give your body a rest.
Everything.
And your brain's part of it.
Everything, right?
So...
Repair?
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm giving it rest. So when I'm giving it rest, I'm assuming it's not pumping at the rate it would.
So it's somehow less active, whatever.
Right. So there's somehow less,
just as much as your body.
There's somehow, if there is depression when I'm sleeping, there's somehow less depression because there's less of everything.
Or maybe there's, there might be, but scalably, I don't know, because maybe you're more depressed when you're sleeping just because the less depressed parts are asleep now, and the depressed parts still just depressed.
I don't know. I have a hard time.
I don't know either. I just don't know enough about it to agree with that statement, because I don't think I can.
But anorexia.
I mean, you're still fat when you go to sleep, if you're me, after surgery. Then I'm still fat when I go to sleep.
I heard once there's a condition where people want to, they don't think their arm should be there. And, chop it off. Something like that. There's conditions that are weird.
We would call that a condition, though, right? We would hardly legitimize that by saying, "Oh, you are give it a name and then fix you."
But would we? But that's society. If I wake up and I think that I am in the wrong, why do we call anorexia a condition and not transgenderism or whatever you call that?
So very interestingly, I think we're having problems based on society and then addressing them based on the body. So we're matching our body.
Forget society
to the mind.
Forget society for a second. Our opinions aren't shaped by what society thinks. For instance, let's think for ourselves for a second.
They most certainly are.
But let's for a second think for ourselves,
Go on.
try to.
All right, I'm giving my best shot.
Why don't we treat anorexia and a transgender person the same way? Why are they different? Why one we treat the mind in a therapy office and one we treat the body in a plastic surgery?
Some people would say that this notion of transgenderism as anything other than an affliction would be what's the best word that I can imagine these folks using this opinion? Arrogance to an extraordinary degree. Or possibly, I struggle to think of the right word when I'm paraphrasing, but essentially, in some people's minds, i.e. the senator who said it's child abuse to go to gender affirmation, to bring your child to gender affirmation therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, heck, that person and a lot of people who think like that senator, plenty of them, obviously enough to get the fellow elected and probably reelected in that southern state, think that it is just like anorexia and you should treat it that way, not by physically mutilating yourself, chemically and physically.
Yeah. Now, the answer to that is because I did go to a therapist and I still think I'm a woman. But the anorexic person also went to a therapist and they still think they're fat. So does that make sense? Okay, so one kills me and one doesn't. I could get behind that. That's
maybe both can kill you. I don't know.
No, I don't think getting breast implants could kill you.
Oh, well, probably not.
Yeah, but anorexia could most certainly kill you. It's a very dangerous condition. I understand that. But it's just an interesting thing where the line is drawn. So do we draw the line between things that could kill me and things that won't? Do we draw the line based on truth? Where do we draw the line? I'm confused. I really don't know.
If you can be drawn into a physiological mutilation and chemical therapy, I feel like that should be addressed specially.
Yeah.
I don't think that falls in the category of cosmetic necessarily in terms of the fix you're trying to achieve.
It's our opinions aside, it is very, very interesting. Maybe we just live in a simulation.
We're in the Matrix.
Maybe we're who knows. I mean, this is just such interesting stuff.
I imagine that any two humans. I spoke to a doctor once who was a practitioner of neurology, and I asked her.
I just had a neurologist on the show.
I wish we'd. Oh boy, next time. So
you want to come on with him again?
Please.
I'll have him come on.
That'd be amazing.
Again, yeah.
So this neurologist, I asked, are a man's brain and a woman's brain?
Oh, I didn't ask that question. You should have been here.
Are they different? Like, could you look at a brain, an arbitrary brain in a jar,
and say if it's different?
And another arbitrary brain in a jar. So this one's a man. One of them's a man's. One of them's a woman.
I don't know the answer to that.
I'll tell you what she said.
Okay, what'd you say?
She said any two people's brains are just as different as any man's and any woman's.
Right, but that's a cop-out answer because are there specific features?
Well, the answer was no, basically.
So men and women don't have different features?
Just by looking at a brain.
Wow.
In her estimation, the answer was a no. She's a qualified person in the field.
Sure. No, I'm not. I'm just curious, yeah.
Could you do some probing and learn which one belonged to which one? More than likely, you would be able to deduce.
That's fascinating. It's almost like
based on what?
Yeah.
Based on what? So if it were based off something, the interesting part comes when you can't tell or you made a mistake.
What do you mean made a mistake?
You said, well, this has to be a man's brain because, and this has to be a woman's brain because. Say you're right 999 out of 1,000 times. What if, without making a mistake in your assessment, in fact, that man's brain was in the body of a woman, or how we define a woman, basically hilariously by their private parts, right? And we define this person as a man by their private parts, generally. And those brains were actually not in the place they were expected.
That's how we define gender.
Okay, so what if maybe... Okay, let me back this up so you make sure you heard me so I can ask the question appropriately because I'm not sure I'm doing it. So there are things in a brain which after probing you will be able to determine whether it belonged to a male or belonged to a female.
True.
With great certainty.
Yes.
So in the event that you probed correctly, you got the results correctly, you would assess that brain A belonged to a man and brain B belonged to a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, you were wrong. In fact, brain A belonged to a woman and brain B belonged maybe also to a woman.
Okay.
In fact, both belonged to women. You would be very surprised. Now, that might be a better way to define a male or a female than some other way. Certainly by their choice of profession. So my question then says, if you can get that deep into say what belongs to someone with a penis and this to someone with a uterus vagina situation, then you would almost have the substance to determine if someone was given the wrong body at birth, wouldn't you? you would almost have that substance. So my question is there such a substance? Do we know? We need to get that neurologist back on camera to tell us.
I don't think that would be a tough one, because that would be like saying, is there something that I could tell if you're going to be anorexic? It's in the brain.
Oh,
it's body dysphoria. What's the word? Dysphoria?
Okay, but
I don't know the term.
But if it's called dysphoria, we're treating it as a disorder, and we're saying it's a problem to be solved.
Is it not a disorder? Is it out of order or within order that I feel trapped in the wrong body? You tell me, John. I'm crazy. Teach me. Is it within order or out of it? You really don't know.
I'm inclined to tell you.
I've spoken with transgender people who tell me it's out of order. It's misaligned with how they wish things were.
Okay, so I would tell you, I would lean toward telling you that the vast majority of people, because it's just hard to believe it's so many of the people who are transgender.
That's a whole other topic.
The vast majority are trying to align themselves with cultural expectations.
But that's a whole other topic.
Rather than if physiological, I am so wrong in my body, and somehow matching that to I would be much more right in that body.
But I'm not talking about those who are pretending.
I know.
Not talking about that.
I realize. But to me, it's a jump to say, now hold on. I just want to say that I heard your question, and I want to answer it this way.
Okay.
Which is that I can absolutely believe that someone can say, man, I'm born in the wrong body. It is a very different thing to go from that certainty to the same grade of certainty that leaping into the body of, say, a woman or literally anyone else would be a better fit. That is dramatic speculation. I think you could be right about not feeling right in your body, but
right.
Whatever right means. But I don't know that you could be right that you better belong in a different body, specifically a different specific body.
I hear you.
I.e. the one that I shall now design with surgery and hormone therapy.
I hear you.
That's my instinct.
But what if statistically, if we lined up all these people who felt that at some point that they're in the wrong body, ever since they transitioned, their brain was able to take a break and be at peace.
Okay. So they had some peaceful years or months or whatever.
Let's
say they yes, you know what? I'm doing better.
Let's say they live peacefully now.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be a transgender. Let's think of someone who thinks their thumb shouldn't be there and their brain is driving them nuts. They can't think straight.
Okay.
Chop the thumb up. No more thumb. They bandage it up. And now they have peace.
Okay. All right.
You can't. Yes, you could sit and say, how'd you know you need to be without a thumb? You were never without a thumb to begin with. How do you know that would make you feel better? The answer is you're right and you're not right. You're right because until I don't have a thumb, I don't know what it's like to not have a thumb. And therefore, I can't sit here and claim that I'll feel better without a thumb. You're right. But you're wrong in the sense that if I'm a fat person and I think I'll feel better skinny, you can't fault me or tell me that I can't think that because I've never been skinny. It's a feeling. It's a suspicion. It's a suspicion.
Okay, but
could you live with that?
You know what? I can, but I cannot then live and say, I wish I had 3 arms.
What do you mean?
All right, so you're in every case, you're talking about chopping something off or losing something of yours.
You could say you wish you had 3 arms. There's just less things you could do about it.
Okay, so there's not fewer things you can do about it.
Okay.
So you can acquire one of these things. Fine. But you're still at your core not changing something. You might be offloading something. You're not offloading extra fat.
No, what about breast implants?
Okay, so now you're adding breast implants.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So in this example, we're defining a female as a person with breasts.
I'm not. Transgender people are.
But those people are.
Uh-huh.
And we're okay. Now, if
well,
that's
actually,
how you
they
want
don't. No, they don't. They don't. I'm sorry, they don't. Because they're female even when they're in a male's body.
Exactly.
So no, they don't define it as a person with breasts. They define male and female based off how I feel, feelings.
Okay.
Yes.
So how? Okay. So we're back into the speculation of feelings. I don't feel like a male, therefore I feel like a female.
No, it's not that they don't feel like a male. They feel like they are female.
Okay, but how do they arrive at that conclusion without first feeling like you are not a male. You first have to feel like you're not a male. If you feel like you are a female instead.
That's almost a given. Yes. Okay, sure.
It's not, but it's important.
Okay.
It's an important step.
I'm
not me.
I'm not.
Second, I'm definitely you.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
So you have to get through the not me part first.
But to what you're saying, not everyone feel I'm something different. Many people are, what's the term? Many people are nothing. Many people are an it.
Okay.
Yeah. We live in a world where you could be anything.
Sure.
So not all men who don't feel that they're men feel like they're women, to what you're saying.
That's great.
Oh yeah, many feel like they're a nothing, many feel like they're a something.
Hey, look, I often don't feel American. I was born in Ohio, but I often don't feel American. Am I anything but American? No, I'm American. However,
you're preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
You're preaching to the choir. But I'm just trying to, as best I can, tell you what I know to be true. I think there's over 20 genders.
Well, this is what I wanted. Are there 20?
There has to. First of all, there's a no. I'm sure there's a no gender today.
Okay.
Non-binary.
I've heard of that.
Dude, there you go.
So
Non-binary.
Imagine, it seems almost more reasonable than
to what you're
physically
saying,
mutilating yourself, right?
Non-binary seems more not feasible, more
at least reasonable,
sensical.
Yeah,
than
totally
saying
reasonable.
that I am something else. Yes, but
saying I don't fit your description of male, I don't fit your description of female, I don't fit anyone's description, but I am me, so screw you. You know what? Good for you. Good on you, even.
Yeah.
To say that you are definitely someone else, that is a bridge too far for me, but having nothing to do with male and female per se, having everything to do with you knowing more what it's like to be someone else than what's appropriate for yourself.
But you can't really say that, because there's many things in life that we do that in all things in life. You want to be an astronaut. How could you want to be an astronaut? You were never an astronaut.
Is it that?
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Is it the same thing to say I want to be a woman or want to be an astronaut? It's the same thing to you?
Not even want. Go take it as far as feel.
Okay.
Yeah, feel. I feel. You talk to people, they go, I'm more of a runner than, or forget that. Take someone who's never ridden a bike or never ran.
Okay.
What do you want to do? I want to run. How do you know you want to run? You've never ran. I feel like I'm probably more of a runner. Doesn't mean that when I get there, it'll be true.
I don't buy it. And I'll tell you why, because I don't feel more like a fish. Just because I've never been on a bike or never run, doesn't mean that I can pick one and be right, just because. I've also never been a fish. I can't say that I know what it's like or feel more like it.
Do you think there's people who...
there's something between fish and cycling, by the way.
Do you think there's people on the planet who, at some point in history, felt like they should have been... And call these people mentally crazy, I don't care what you call them, but felt that they should be like a cow, right? I'm assuming that existed at some point in the past.
I'm assuming it exists today, because everything does.
Right. So, back to what you're saying.
I don't know that it existed before.
Okay, so it exists today.
In fact, maybe I'll say that it definitely did not exist before we gave ourselves license to believe that that's actually something we can truly believe.
Great. So,
believe that we can believe it. You see, that's a new level.
We're not talking about whether or not it is, we're not talking about whether this person is actually right or wrong, or whether their thoughts or feelings are true or not true. We're talking about the fact that this person claims that this is what they feel, because I'm not in their head.
Okay.
All I have is their claim.
Right.
Is the claim happening? Yes.
What do you mean by the claim? Is the claim happening?
Is the claim that men feel like they're women?
Oh, are people claiming that?
Yes.
They most certainly are claiming that.
Right. To some of them, not going down the rabbit hole, what we talked about where many pretend, and social media, you're right, there's a bunch of that. But is there one in the world where you could believe within yourself, come to terms with the fact that there's one
Absolutely.
who wakes up in the morning and truly feels that?
I will even go so far as to say there is one who is mostly right. Like, in all the senses of being right.
Who feels that?
Someone with... so you'd have to break down the physiological elements, not just the societal ones, but all the elements, whatever goes in the female column and male column. I believe there are people who would appear to you and appear to me and appear generally.
Yeah.
Certainly as one.
Got it.
And then, but in actuality, when you total it up, in all of the ways except for appearance, minus one or two, it would be well stacked up in the female category.
Yeah.
You take culture right out of it.
Yeah.
I believe there probably is one or two of those lurking around.
Sure. And those are the ones we're talking about.
So let's talk about them.
No. But those are the ones I have been talking about. I'm not.
I know. I mean, let's only talk about them.
That's what I'm only talking about. That's what I want to tell you. I don't have any interest to talk about the one who pretends. Many pretend. Those are irrelevant. I'm talking about the one who wakes up in the morning and is sick to their stomach to be with a penis. Does one exist? Let's talk about that. That's all that matters. I don't care about all the rest. One exists. I don't know. One exists.
So let them do something about it, right?
And that's the one we're talking about. And now the big question is...
But just don't let them swim in the NCAA. Because
don't compete against the other sex.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
That's it. I'll go dress shopping with you.
For sure.
We'll do a bachelorette party. Dude.
Why not? It's just a party.
We'll do whatever she wants to do. I'll call her she. She's pretty. We'll go to appointments together. Whatever. We'll do all the girly things that girls do. No problem with that. I have no problem with that. No problem with that. In fact, you could be a pilot. You could be an astronaut. Has there been a trans astronaut? I'm sure.
Probably in the next couple months.
You could be the president. I'm not. Seriously. You could do anything. I don't care. Don't make me claim that your gender is something it's not. Here's what it comes down to. Don't
any more than you would allow me to claim for you.
Don't force me to lie. Don't force me to say something I don't believe in. That's it.
We're pretty much coming down to the very essence of my favorite Supreme Court ruling had included in it. Your freedom ends at the bridge of my nose. Your freedom to swing your fist
ends at the bridge of my nose.
Ends at the bridge of my nose.
Yes, exactly. And it's not only that. I'm more welcoming than that because I could easily say, I don't want to call you a he or she. No, I don't. Hey, whatever you want. Should companies hire you in the same way they hire me, meaning looking at your resume and at your experience?
True.
Oh my gosh, yes. Could you do anything? Legit. Yes, you could do anything. Could you do anything that any woman could do? 100%. Could you do anything that any man could do? 100%. And I'm not talking about the giving birth. I'm talking about in terms of could you become a CEO? Could you? And they have. Women proved stuff. Trans people proved stuff. Everyone proved. Everyone could do everything. The problem is how do we create a space in which everyone recognize it's almost like redefining the lines. I think the problem we discovered tonight is that the lines are way blurred, meaning the pay gap means men are horrible and women are oppressed.
Right. So this is some dishonesty in information sharing.
Complete dishonesty.
Yeah.
The pay gap is very much alive. Agenda.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. The pay gap is very much. I was listening to a podcast today. I forget his name. Have you heard of this guy who talks with like the white supremacists and the Klan people? He's a black guy, and he devoted his life, and he literally changes the way they see the world, and he sort of gets them out of it, and they no longer like support that life, and they're no longer that community. Anyway, interesting interview, and he was talking about his interactions and how he talks with people and how he gets them to see things differently. And he said you could never change the way someone sees something by telling them they're wrong, whatever. He said the only way to do it is by presenting and offering them a new perspective and a new, forget the term he used. And the way he does that, and he gave examples. He said when he sits down with these people start out and say, the prisons are filled with way more blacks than whites. To which he doesn't say you're wrong. Because like the pay gap, that's a true statistic. There's more blacks in prison, incarcerated, than whites. It's a true statistic. But what he focuses on is the why behind it, just like the pay gap. We're not arguing about the pay gap. The pay gap is true. Why is it that way? So he starts going into why are there more blacks in prison? And then he starts going into, and again, I'm just sharing what he said. I'm no expert in this. I've never looked into it. And he goes into, okay, there's with the justice system, there's an imbalance there, which again, I know nothing about and I can't speak to. Another example he was talking about when he sits with these people, they say, oh yeah, you black people have a lower IQ on average. He doesn't argue with that because he said if you look on average statistically, they have a lower IQ. But the question is why? And the answer is if you start looking at where most black kids go to school, inner cities, and you look at the school systems, and he started saying, well, now in the inner city, if you compare black and white kids' IQ, black kids could score higher than whites. And not in the inner city, black kids could score higher than whites. So we said, just like the pay gap, it's an overall bird's eye view, which is completely not fair, and it's not a plain, even playing field.
It would serve us all to avoid drawing conclusions from correlations for those exact reasons.
What do you mean drawing conclusions from correlations?
The correlation between IQ and race.
100%. It has to do with location. Where do you go to school?
The real cause ain't nothing but a little bit of cash, right? It has nothing to do with the pigment value of somebody's skin. So
100%.
This is
the
why.
Point. Yes.
This is exactly why. And that pay may then reverse itself into a race issue, but race and IQ being connected isn't causal, is what I'm saying. Directly.
A racist person probably is coming from the same place.
Oh, like someone prone to racism, or look, everyone's prone to prejudice and racism. Everyone's prone to it. Everyone's prone to a lot of these bad things. It doesn't mean we have to succumb to it.
100%. A person who thinks that blacks have lower IQ because they're blacks is no different than a woman who thinks that women get paid less because they're female. Does that make sense?
Look, I'm with you on that. And that's what I mean by drawing conclusions
100%.
From correlations.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
We would probably do a lot better not to do that, but I guess that wouldn't make for a sensational evening news, would it?
No, I'm with you 100%. And so, I think the bottom line of this whole thing is unblur the lines. And it's a problem because people kick the lines away.
And even if just for a moment, so that you can gain some truth. I love a book called Behave by Robert Sapolsky. He initializes this book, or initiates anyway, the content by saying, okay, you want to study behavior as a psychologist, put it in that bucket. Okay, you can learn some things. As a geneticist, fine. Biologist, primatologist, everyone's going to have their own bent. And, in a context, it can help you understand what's going on. But you are then limited by that context, and you would serve yourself to realize that you can't draw conclusions from outside your universe with only the tools in your universe. So similarly, I think we should, find those contexts for those contexts and realize that they're not broadly applicable. Right. And then, throw it all in the mix after that. But at least, have some truth behind your foundation of knowledge rather than just speculations. So, for example, he says a behavior is, in this Sapolsky book, he basically describes behavior as some kind of change in action. So he often goes to the example of touching someone on the shoulder or firing a weapon. These are both behaviors. There's some neurological event happening. But surrounding that neurological event is a lot. But in that moment, let's look at that moment. The hand moves somehow or another. How it moves, now that's getting interesting. So the hand moves mechanically. So we talk about what goes on and how that can affect what actually happens. Right. The mechanics, the simple mechanics of the thing. And the limitations that are in of a neuron and all this very interesting stuff. Now, you got to back out from that because you can't then say, well, I was short on this neurotransmitter, therefore I did that. Hold on. There's more happening. You made a decision. Okay, you might have been short on a neurotransmitter, but that didn't cause you to fire a weapon or touch someone's shoulder. It might have caused you to fire a weapon or not fire a weapon. Maybe, but unlikely. Right? There's more going on. So he backs out of that bucket. And he says, okay, well, let's surround it with, and then he gets, eventually he works his way all the way out to culture and all the way out to genetics and biology. And I mean all the way out. He starts comparing us to other species even and saying, well, look, you can say that we're all monkeys, but you'd have to pick one. And you might be wrong because we demonstrate these, I don't know actually how you pronounce bonobos or bonobos or what.
I think it's bonobos, but.
I think so too. So you have bonobos who demonstrate a certain type of behavior.
Boner-bos.
And you know what? They're I believe the description is non-sexually dimorphic, meaning the males and the females look similar in build, structure, or whatever. So obviously, they have different fun parts in the end, but they also there's male and female, right? But they do similar stuff. They look similarly, and they demonstrate behavior that is very un-alpha male kind of behavior. They're like maybe a little bit more go with the group kind of folks. Well, baboons, on the other hand, you know a male simply by how big it is.
Yeah.
And you know a female, and like their colors are different. I mean, you definitely know. The untrained eye wouldn't know a male from a female bonobo, but it would in, say, this species of baboon. So they demonstrate different behaviors. So if you say, oh, we're all monkeys, fine. But in what context?
Mm.
And I find that to be enlightening, because sometimes we're bonobos and sometimes we are more like baboons or chimpanzees. All right. Well, let me pump the brakes on that, because to say that we come from monkeys is to say that today's monkeys are less evolved than we are. We have evolved in different ways, surely, because, we're different. We do different stuff. We eat different food, etc., different behaviors. So in that sense, we are definitely different, and we've definitely evolved differently. But we are not all one kind of monkey or the other kind of primate or this kind of primate, all bonobos or all chimpanzees or all whatever. In fact, we all have a common cousin way back there, and they don't even exist anymore, maybe. I mean, maybe they went straight through and didn't branch off at all, and maybe that's a gorilla, or maybe it's not. Who knows what it is. But, and probably people are trying to find out which one was the central one. But we have just as much in common in terms of genetic material, biologically, as one and the other. And you know what? We do demonstrate similar behaviors that one species would do and the other species would never. And humans are a mixed bag like that. And in terms of genetics, there's obviously the greatest argument of our time, which is nature and nurture, I think, in terms of psychology, anyway, or even psychology versus. I don't know if it's fair to just say psychology versus, maybe that's wrong of me, but let's say it's nature and nurture, because that's where we are in psychology, and that's where the debate rages. But I keep going back to this book because it's so rich with examples and just elemental truth, it seems like, where he quotes, well, now I'll have to paraphrase, it makes no more sense to talk about nature being more important than nurture than it does to talk about the length of a square being more important than the width of it in determining the area. In a given context, you see how one changes and then affects the area of the square. But saying that one is important and one is not in a given context is simply false. So similarly, we have to give ourselves, I guess, that latitude to understand one another, that we generally don't know what is in another person's mind.
Nothing.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't be able to say with any amount of certainty, that's for sure. Right?
100%. 100%. It's there's the more you talk about these things with people, and the more you hear people's opinion, the more you explore your own, which is important. I mean, so many people say, listen to others. Listen, hey, what do you believe in? What floats your boat? What strikes you as right, wrong? What's your take? Like, your take is as interesting as mine. You know what I mean? And my take is as interesting as the next guy who doesn't think like me. Like, it's all interesting. But I think if more people included their own take, and weren't afraid of it. So many people feel guilty for thinking or believing certain things. And it's not even about what you believe. Explore the underlying why. Why do I see it that way? Why? What is it about the world, society, my family, where I come from? What is it about stuff that make me have that belief? And then after that, listening to others and exploring other people's take and asking the same question. Why do they see it that way? Does it have to do with where they come from? Does it have to do with something that I'm unaware of? Does it have to do with a preconceived notion I operate with? I mean, it's really interesting stuff. And the more I do that, the more I wouldn't say realize how little I knew, but the more I realize how yes, there's one fact and a million opinions, but every fact is really made up of so many different intricate stuff.
Yeah, and you can tell where someone's leaning when they draw their conclusion, where, because it's so hard. It's so hard to get an actual cause out of a correlation, because you have to eliminate every other correlation finally to get at your cause.
Right.
How many people actually go through something like that kind of rigor? I mean, most academic papers don't even get that far. So unless you're doing a dissertation on something, you're probably guessing. And even then you're guessing.
If there's one question, let's end with this. If there's one question you think more people, if they ask themselves, we would be all be better off, what would your question, what do you think people should ask themselves when they're thinking about these different topics? What's a good way to approach it?
Would I want someone to tell me what I'm allowed to do or what I'm allowed to think or how I should think or how I should feel?
Would I want someone to tell me everything that I tell others to do?
No.
So say that again.
Would I want someone to tell me how I'm supposed to feel, how I'm supposed to think, what I should do, what I shouldn't do?
But I'm assuming you want them to ask themselves that because
I do. I want them to ask themselves that before they speak.
Right. Okay, got
Yes.
it. Got it.
Before
Okay,
they go
interesting.
telling someone how to live their lives, which is where we get into trouble, by the way.
Right.
I mean, I think that's where we as a country get into trouble because, then once we start excluding each other based on false grounds like that, we can then not have a conversation about anything and then proceed to let the real problems send on their merry way.
Yeah.
Habitat destruction, not just of animals, of our own. We have energy issues, we have consumption issues, we have violence issues, we have a lot of issues that we could really talk about and maybe really get better in addressing, if not even find good solutions to our problems.
Yeah.
So many things to discuss that never get discussed because we're busy not talking to each other.
Yeah.
And I think if there were one thing I would ask someone to ask themselves before they get engaged in a conversation is something along those lines. Or something about, so I mentioned the word disdain earlier. If you're going to hold someone in disdain, like if you're willing to tell them how they should feel or judge them based on how they act.
What does disdain mean?
Disdain is basically, you say a certain thing or do a certain thing, and I think you're less than I am.
Got it.
Now, I feel like I have moral authority over you or just general authority over
Got
you
it.
that projects starts with moral and then grows into actual authority.
Got it.
This is disdain. It's not quite hatred. It's like, I believe you're less than I am.
Got it.
You could hate someone who you believe is more than you are, but
Got it.
you can't disdain. For you to disdain someone, you got to be here and they got to be there. It's like a captain and everybody else.
Got it.
All right? So if you are going to hold someone, if you're going to disdain someone, holding that kind of contempt, you have to know so much about their entire lives.
Yes.
You have to know so much about what they've been through.
Yes.
You have to know all of their story and still feel like you're better than they are. So when you hold someone in contempt or when you really disdain someone, well, let's just say you shouldn't because you're really making a real jerk of yourself when you do that. An arrogant jerk, as a matter of fact. And, we basically, we witness in this country and a lot of other ones, that is the way people address each other. You are less than I am. That is a terrible behavior.
Horrible.
If you want to work together,
100%.
If you want to exclude someone, treat them that way.
100%.
Yeah, that's how you exclude someone. This textbook excludes someone. You want someone out of your situation? Be awful to them, right? That's the key way. Get rid of them.
100%.
Be violent with them. Punch them in the face, which you'd only be able to do to someone for whom you had a quantity of disdain.
Yeah.
You call it inflict pain deliberately onto someone like that. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So I think we would do much better
if people led with that.
Yeah, if they led with that. And, well, I have to make a tiny correction because you can definitely try to inflict violence on someone for whom you have no disdain. You can just hate them. But still.
That was a very important correction. Johnny. No, I hear you. I think that's a beautiful thing. And
how about you? What would you tell people? One thought you wish they had before they started speaking.
To ask why. Like I said before, so when they're confronted with something or something's in front of them that they feel a certain way about. For instance, Russia and Ukraine are fighting. Before you rush to conclusions about any side, ask why. Back up, zoom out. Why is this happening?
A reading list for our listeners, for the one guy we're going to email this podcast to. you should read Peter Zion, The Accidental Superpower, The Absent Superpower, and The Disunited Nations.
Okay.
You could probably just read one and get the gist. There's parts that'll be more interesting of each book to you.
Yeah.
I recommend the whole read. And his premise is, and I love how people start with a very simple truth and expand carefully. And he starts with, it's hard to move stuff. And he starts there. And you have to have navigable water, or you have to have a way to walk. Like if you're in the Andes, moving stuff is hard. If you're in the United States, areas that are now considered the United States, moving stuff is pretty easy.
Right.
And you take it from there. And he takes it from there. He winds it all the way back from ancient times to future times, and he addresses, in fact, with extraordinary accuracy, shocking even accuracy, he says there will be a war of Russian twilight. He writes this years and years ago, by the way. And he addresses energy issues, and it all comes from the same thing about, the paradigm of moving stuff being difficult. And he says, all right, well, Russia is either going to have to expand its borders or retract them. And it's going to have to start with Ukraine. And it's going to have to start with warm water ports.
Wait, but now you're giving them some side to believe that.
He didn't say it was right. He just said if Russia doesn't want to contract.
Got it.
Then they will have to expand. Because they're in a no man's land of size.
Interesting.
For their population, and their population is not getting better. It's getting worse. So they have either got to gain more resources and access, or they have got to shrink.
Yeah.
So here's how he lays it out based on everyone's dynamics. And he says, Ukraine first.
Interesting.
Yeah, and he said, by the way, it's already happening. He wrote this many years ago. So this problem that we're seeing with Ukraine and Russia is not new. That doesn't, no matter what you say about Ukraine, it's hard for me to then hear you say, so Russia could invade or should invade, or Zelensky should give up and Ukrainians should just give up and just be part of Russia. I don't know how you get from this country is a bummer and not doing a great job to they should definitely be invaded by their neighbor. Because if that were the case, look, we've been a bummer and done a bad job before. Should Russia have invaded us? I mean, should we have invaded X, Y, and Z countries that the United States invaded? A lot of people say no. So anyway, I don't believe you can give Russia a whole lot of slack for their actions, but you can also understand it was coming. And if you could have just understood that, you maybe could have prevented it. Or maybe give someone a carrot instead of a stick, because we've been freezing out the Russians, for a long time, and they've been freezing us out. It's the Cold War, right? We've been freezing each other out for a long time, based on whatever historical activities. So there hasn't been an open line. There's been no carrot. There's been very little partnership since at least 70 years ago, mostly. Now, that's going to make it hard to live on the same planet, Yeah. So if you're the Russian Federation and you got problems that can be solved with more territory or die, you might make a fuss over it. That's understandable. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that's the position there. Maybe this Russian Federation shouldn't exist. And I think if the alternative to war is you shouldn't exist, well, guess what? Maybe you shouldn't murder a whole lot of people so that you'll have an easier time in your country. Maybe you shouldn't, bestow yourself upon someone's freedom or like impose yourself upon their way of life. Maybe that's, the obvious litmus test. But you can say also that you could see it coming because this is the trouble they face. Now, I was once in a race in Switzerland, and when the race finished, it was about 65 degrees Fahrenheit outside. It was kind of nice. They had these hot tubs. The hot tub water was like 85. And it was getting colder outside. That's why the hot tub water was now down to 85. So you got in, and you felt kind of warm. But you stayed in there for about 10 minutes after this race, which took all stinking day.
Got cold.
You started to get cold. Now you put your hand outside, it's 55 degrees Fahrenheit. And you think, oh man, if I stay in this water for another 20 minutes, I'm going to freeze to death in here. But if I get out of this water, I'm going to freeze to death right away. I feel like this is the situation Russia's put themselves in. They're in this collapsing economy. There's no future in it. They will freeze to death in that hot tub. And so now they're getting out.
Interesting.
So how do they do it? Taking someone else's towel is what it looks like.
Wow.
Well, thanks for having me, man. This has been a lot of fun.
Solid. Jon, thanks for coming on.
It was my pleasure.
I love it.